Hello and welcome back everyone, we Weeb online, and today I'm gonna continue the story What If Naruto Became the Flying Thunder God Part 3. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and to watch more videos like this, subscribe to my channel and turn that bell notification on so you never miss an upload. Now wasting no more time, let's begin.
Naruto's feet landed with a solid thump on a bushy branch of a crooked tree. The crooked branches of the tree were trying to reach high into the sky. To the east, there were vast grasslands that were sometimes broken up by plants that weren't getting enough food. To the west, there was an equally large forest that held most of the food for miles around. The sun was setting, and it was just above the tops of the tallest trees. It shone down and made every shadow a strange red color, like blood. Before he knew why, the tense moment of waiting hit him, and he flipped himself up and away from the kunai that was coming at him before he even saw the metal shine. Cut leaves fell from the branch he had just left, and the knife stuck into the bark with a twang, just missing him by a few inches. As he looked down between the branches, Naruto easily caught himself and stuck to the higher branch with just a little bit of chakra. He attacked his attacker with a well-timed kick that hit the small figure right in the chest. He then used the momentum from his attack to flip back into the air and use a burst of chakra to launch himself to the top of the tree, where he stood with his arms crossed. "Are you done yet?" he asked calmly as he watched the two genin stumbling around on the ground, one of them holding her chest. There was no answer. The tree exploded under him with a shuddering thud. He muttered, "Clever," and in a flash of light and sound, he threw himself through nothingness towards his target. He landed in a squat on the ground with no warning and no sound. He smiled as he tapped his attacker's neck with the three-pronged kunai he was now holding. He said, "Well, it looks like you're dead, Rin, but that was one hell of a throw. That's two down. Where did Kakashi go?" Naruto felt himself swaying as the forest shimmered, and he shook his head in irritation. Slowly, the ground moved back and forth, and he had to take a few steps to get back on his feet before he could look up. The thick forest around him looked oppressive, and a wave of stale air swept over him. "That jerk. Kakashi went ahead to scout, Sensei," Obito said with a small pout. Naruto turned around, confused. He narrowed his eyes at something just out of reach for a moment, sure that he was missing something. Then the feeling went away, and he smiled at the young Uchiha to reassure him. "Again, huh?" Obito groaned. "Yeah, I told him you didn't order anything like that, but he said you didn't forbid it either. It's standard procedure, or something. It must have been in those shinobi rules he keeps reciting." Naruto groaned. "I get it. I guess it was inevitable that he would get impatient," he said. "Well, this is my mess to clean up, since I was the one who got called away. Wait here until Rin comes back, and I'll go catch up with him. We'll come back to meet you. If you see any sign of Iwa Nin, avoid them and go east. This is just a C rank, but you never know. It shouldn't take us more than an hour, you'll be fine." He gave Obito a short pat on the shoulder and put a temporary seal on him. "Don't worry. Kakashi will probably calm down in time." Obito asked carefully, biting his lip, "Is he going to get in trouble for this? He was so sure you wouldn't care that." Naruto said with a smile, "I'll just talk to him in a serious way." He then firmly stepped onto the bark of the nearest tree and walked up. "Don't worry too much, and be careful. If you see enemy Nin, try to get some smoke in the air to signal Konoha. If that happens, I'll get to your position to help. We're probably safe here, but with tensions as high as they are, you never know when all hell could break loose." Naruto stumbled and grabbed his head as the world started to shake. The trees started to blur together as the pain behind his eyes exploded and ran through his veins like poison. It took a few seconds for the feeling to go away, and then he carefully looked back up. The forest burned. It was engulfed by a raging fire that cooked everything in seconds, searing it to the bone. As Naruto moved forward, he was careful to avoid the falling branches, and a thin layer of chakra on his skin kept him from getting too hot. The team was safe as they could be in enemy territory with Kakashi close to running out of chakra, but this fire wasn't helping at all. Still, he had to move because he had to do his own thing. He needed to find someone important to help. No matter how hot it was or how tired he was, which made him have to move slowly even though his chakra was running out faster than he would have liked. Not for the first time, he cursed himself for not leaving her one of his Hiraishin seals. The kunai had been thrown away, so he couldn't jump to her side. He had to use old-fashioned methods to find Kushina, and the path that went straight through the inferno was the least likely to be guarded. No matter what else he did, He had to give Kushina a permanent seal when this was over. If need be, 1,000 of them. If he could help it, there was no way he would ever let her out of his sight again. Naruto threw one of his kunai through the fire, and it looped through the air without anyone noticing. The little paper seal on the kunai's handle stayed in place thanks to the last bit of chakra. Naruto was there before it could dig into the ground. He grabbed it by the handle as his shadow floated in front of him and his cloak wrapped itself around him. The hem was on fire, and the flames were eating away at the white fabric from below. He held his sword between his hands and focused on his Hiraishin as he put down dozens of seals at once, one for every step he took. No battlefield was ever unprepared for long, because seals were always being put down. More than 24 Iwa nin were fighting a red-haired Konoha kunoichi named Kushina. Kushina was spinning blue-colored chakra chains in all directions, cutting and severing limbs with amazing accuracy.
Still, it was clear that she was getting worse. The next second, Naruto was by her side. He looked at her briefly to see how bad her injuries were, and then he gave the Iwa shinobi a mean look. The Iwa shinobi backed away, either because they were surprised or scared by the sudden appearance of Naruto. The first one didn't know he was dead. His eyes went dark and showed only surprise as his spinal cord was cut between breaths.
The kills were fast and easy. Routine, even. As more Iwa nin joined the fight, though, the sheer number of them wasn't. Naruto threw himself into the fight without hesitation, even though his strength was barely up to the task. However, his will overcame any tiredness or weakness that he couldn't show here. For the enemy, he was just a blur, like a flying weapon that you couldn't see until it grabbed your neck and tore it out.
There were a lot of Iwa nin, and they made a fatal mistake by walking into this trap they had set for themselves. The ground was now covered in Hiraishin seals, and kunai fell in every direction, acting as anchors for his most dangerous move. Waves of fire that they had set themselves blocked the only way out.
They had no chance of winning. It was one man against a whole army, and the Iwa nin had no chance. All the moments were mixed up, and Naruto seemed to dance on the edge of time, going away and coming back before he fully understood what was going on. He just cut the throat he was aiming for and moved on. All of the people's faces were smeared with fear, and all he could see was a moving enemy that had to be killed 1,000 times. Today, on the battlefield, he was the Shinigami. He is now a well-known person. The yellow flash was everywhere. Shinobi fell without warning, were hurt by a momentary flash of blonde hair, were killed by a wraith that was gone before the mind could process it, and swung their swords. The next thing was the sphere of destructive power, which sent out twisted chakra that tore into anything and destroyed it completely. The Rasengan took armor, weapons, and even people. Naruto stabbed a Chunin in the knees, cut through the chakra strings of a puppeteer, and slashed a tall shinobi in the face with his kunai. He was gone before the man could watch the man's jaw slowly loosen as he fell over. As Naruto walked right in front of the people who made the jagged pieces of earth, they didn't even notice them. Even though he tried hard to hide his disgust, his stomach churned, and the enemy's resolve was soon broken by panic. Their lines broke up. They turned and ran away slowly, like a tide that suddenly crashed into high shores.
What was left was a graveyard, a killing field, in the middle of which stood Kushina with her head held high. She smiled with grace, and the moonlight made her beautiful red hair shine. It was finally over, and it was time to go back to where it was safe. His hand shook as he put the kunai he was still holding into its sheath. This battle was over, but there were more to come. The teacher had to be found.
Naruto stopped and shook his head. The battlefield shook and moved in front of his eyes. He tried to remember if this had ever happened to him before, but decided it hadn't. Maybe it was the battle that had worn him out so much. How many of those dead people were there? Is everything okay? As Naruto sat down in their small hideout in the forest, he blinked and looked up at Jiraiya. Medical nin were running in and out, and there were long lines of injured Konoha nin. Dozens of bodies of those who didn't make it were already piled up. Naruto realized that he must have looked like death warmed over because Jiraiya was looking at his bloody body with a mix of wonder, regret, and maybe even pain. "I'm fine, and the left flank is safe, Jiraiya-sensei," Naruto finally said as he stretched his legs and looked up at his longtime teacher and friend. He would have smiled, but it was too hard for him to do so at the time. "Our position is safe for now, and I'm sure Kushina can handle herself. Instead, we should send the Toads to help the center attack, because if that line falls, it's all over."
Jiraiya said, "You just had to show off, didn't you?
and helped him sit up straighter when he was almost asleep. That last fight really wore you down, didn't it? For now, you should probably rest.
No, Naruto said right away in a steely voice. Every battle I win makes a difference, and I'm the only one who can use that jutsu so well. If the victory is decisive, it gives the Hokage's forces a better chance, and you know that. Jiraiya shook his head. You're impossible, you know that. Take a break, and I'll do your job for a while. I've been staying back here too long, anyway, unless you're going to insult my abilities, he said with a snort. I would never do that, Naruto said with a small smile, but I'm going back. Konoha needs us both, sensei. If this isn't a solid victory, we might lose more than we gained in the last year, and I won't let those sacrifices be for nothing. What kind of shinobi would I be if I let laziness get in the way? He jerked again as the room faded and became blurry in front of his eyes. Is he really that tired? As he looked at Jiraiya's worried face, he blinked a few times. He might have had a point. He was in the middle of a thought when he suddenly found himself in freefall, hand outstretched as reality twisted around him. Hiraishin. When he walked up to Oji-san with a kunai in his hand and a smile on his face, Oji-san gave him a confused look and blinked. The Hokage's office was spinning around in a strange way, as if he were standing on the deck of a ship. For a moment, it became even clearer than reality. Hokage-sama, Jiraiya-sensei told me that you wanted to see me, Naruto asked with a frown. He said you were in danger, so I guess that's not true? Even though the whole world was shaking, the old man said with a slight nod, he lied. Or rather, he played a trick on you, Minato. You've been so busy with everything that it's been hard to reach you. Sometimes, it seems like you're running the whole village by yourself. Naruto cocked his head to the side and said, let's not go overboard. Naruto noticed that the third wasn't wearing the hat, so he opened his mouth to ask why. The older man could run faster. Please sit down, she said. He nodded and took a deep drag from his pipe. I insist. Naruto sat down with some fear. Hokage-sama? The third was happy. You know, I've told you about my plans for the future, so you shouldn't be so surprised that I asked you to come here first. He reached down and put the hat on his desk, facing Naruto. The kanji for fire was easy to see. Change comes with peace, and no matter what people say, I'm getting old. During the first 2 shinobi world wars, everyone talked about me, he said with a knowing smile. Now, they are singing someone else's. Naruto froze. Sir, the third cocked his head. Konoha needs a symbol of strength and vitality, not an old man who's losing both, he said. I've had my time, more than most people get, he nodded. I choose you to be my successor, Namikaze Minato. You will be the 4th Hokage of Konoha. Naruto closed his eyes, and the world shook again. Who are you? Asked the third. The old man said something like, don't tell me you're going to pass out. Kushina did say. Naruto asked, why? As the room fell over, but he didn't fall. Instead, he stood on the ground, which was now a wall, and his chakra kept him there. His mother smiled and stood in front of him. I have news, and I think you might pass out. Naruto's hands were looking through papers on his desk. When had he even sat down, let alone gotten a desk? He made a sad face and shook his head. Kushina's eyes sparkled with happiness and joy. Is it really that bad? He asked, a little worried but also drawn in by her smile. I wouldn't say that. You idiot Hokage, she said as she jumped up and landed rather awkwardly on his desk, knocking over a stack of carefully stacked scrolls. The wall, too. Naruto no longer knew which way was up. Things were starting to look like a messed up genjutsu. It's something we've dreamed about, Kushina said as she rubbed her belly and smiled from ear to ear. Something very important. The truth came to Naruto just as he reached down to his mother, who was carrying him, in shock. With that realization, the world fell apart for the last time and did not come back together again. The dream was gone in an instant, like a bubble popping. Naruto was so startled when he woke up that he threw himself halfway out of bed. His wounds hurt so much that he let out a half-stifled cry of pain. He had to stop for a moment because his head was spinning and he felt sick. His bandages were torn and his severe wounds hurt. He was hanging off the side of his hospital bed, tangled in his sheets, and confused. He muttered, what the hell was all that? As he sighed and pulled himself back onto the soft mattress. Even though he moved quickly, his wounds hurt, but they seemed to be much better since the night before. If it was yesterday, it was hard to tell the time in a room without a window. He had feverish, jumbled dreams all night. Most of them were gone when he woke up, and the ones he tried to remember were jumbled and falling apart as he tried to remember more than slivers of them. He knew they were memories after the first time, when he saw a younger version of himself, who seemed to be him, in class with a fiery redhead. He knew his mother, which made the boy his father. Now, the boy's words came back to him. These were Naruto's last words before he broke the seal and let out the chakra Kurama had taken from him without him knowing. As payment for listening in on his father's thoughts, his father's last gift to him was a half-forgotten dream from the past. It was already going away, and it hurt his head a lot, but it still felt important. He had to concentrate, clear his mind, and figure out what it meant. Now that blood was again getting into his bandages, Naruto sat up in the hospital bed and tried to find a more comfortable position. Each position was too uncomfortable for him, so he moved his legs closer together. He didn't cross them, but he put one in front of the other. His body moved slowly, but it wasn't anything that couldn't be fixed with a little bit of focus and determination. He straightened his back and didn't pay attention to the sharp pain in his lower stomach. A medic nin would probably have his hide for it, but he had to find a familiar position to get his mind back together. Naruto put his arms on his knees and took slow, deep breaths for a few minutes. In. Out. All of it had been a dream. As long as he kept his mind clear, his dreams couldn't hurt him. He stopped moving and only let his chest move when he breathed. In. Out. The pain finally went away, giving him some sense of what was going on. He only moved his eyes as he looked around the room. It was empty, and his nerves didn't give him any signs that someone was watching him. He had trained them so well that his senses were often too sharp. Then, he was by himself. In. Out. Naruto closed his eyes and slowly went into a meditative state. He focused on his seal, which was kind of a place he went to talk to the fox or, sometimes, his parents. He had broken the seal, so the chakra of his father should have been able to spread out and run free. Yet even now, he could still feel some of it. It wasn't as focused and localized as before, and the seal didn't hold it back, but it was still there.
Naruto realized that the seals Jiraiya had put on him made it hard to look at his chakra. He wasn't as good at sealing as his father or Jiraiya, mostly because he didn't care enough about school to spend much time on it, and he only knew a lot about the seals he actually used. The Hiraishin was his first real use of everything he had learned, and he did it because he wanted to copy his father's best jutsu.
These chakra suppression seals were very specific and made for a certain person. Jiraiya had to work very hard to finish them in the short time that Naruto was unconscious. They wouldn't last long because the chakra would eventually overpower the seal and cause it to fall apart, but it was clear that they could help someone whose reserves were completely gone. If he wanted to figure out what was going on with his chakra and his father's, he would probably have to take them out. He thought, though, that there was another way he could find out what was going on without having to use fuinjutsu to mess with the seals. Those were designed for regular chakra, after all. They weren't made to use energy from nature. Naruto gave a thin smile when he realized that staying still wouldn't be hard. He pushed away any pain feelings and tasted the natural energies around him. He was a little hesitant to use Sage Mode before he knew what his new limits were, since a lot of his chakra had been torn away or blocked, but he hadn't spent so long with the toads without learning some skill. He had never been very careful, but that didn't matter. In an instant, he felt a surge of natural energy all around him. This energy was part of everything and ran through all of life. As soon as even a small amount of chakra joined his, it surged, giving him a short burst of strength and agility that felt like electricity running across his skin. Naruto jerked his eyes open, and his pupils dilated as he tried to find a balance between his physical and mental energies. For a moment, he thought it was a mistake and that he had lost the fight for balance, but then he got hold of himself. He could feel his eyes changing as the colors changed. They were brighter and clearer than they had been since he had first gone back in time. He closed his eyes again. The Sage Mode boost to his senses made him aware of everyone in the whole building. He could feel the Anbu right outside the door and 3 more that were more carefully hidden a little further along. He could feel the group of orphans, which included his other self, as well as the Anbu who were watching over that area. He could feel the 3rd Hokage's bright light, and he could feel the old man's power from all the way in the hospital. Even though it was unusual, it wasn't something he hadn't seen before. Naruto knew that Jiraiya had more, and Jiraiya currently had a couple of Kage Bunshin running around, misleading about the true depth of his chakra reserves. Yet, the 3rd had a sense of focus that most other nin didn't have. He had a feeling of concentration and control that made him a powerful opponent that Naruto would never want to face. God of Shinobi, huh? Naruto laughed as he turned his attention inward. The natural energy that ran through all living things also ran through his veins. There, next to his own chakra, which he had never felt so pure, he found traces of his father's chakra. There were more of them than he had thought. His father had left behind more than just a small amount of chakra, a piece of himself. After spending the energy needed to briefly take control of his body, his father turned the chakra inward instead of outward, where it would have spread out into the world. What was left was taken in by Naruto's own chakra circulation system, where it was slowly absorbed and turned into something else. It was a trace of a memory, a tiny bit of consciousness that was still part of the system his son was still using. Everything that the sealed clone had been was now a stream of bits and pieces that the new host body was using for its own purposes, just like it had done with the Kyuubi's chakra. It wasn't a direct transfer of memories, but more like a whisper or an echo. Soon, Naruto would add those memories and feelings to the many others he already had. They would serve as a much-needed reminder of how his father felt about him and what this time and place were like. He couldn't remember much, only some strange thoughts, feelings, fears, and happinesses. The sum of one's life. It made him feel close to and supported by his father, and most importantly, it gave him the certainty that his father believed in him and would always be there for him in some way. And that was worth every bit of pain. Naruto said to the empty room, "I will make you proud." Believe it, but no one heard him. He could feel that his burned-out chakra was coming back. One of the benefits of Sage Mode was that it quickly restored chakra, which was important now even though he had never had problems with it before. Overwhelmed by the steady flow of energy, the remaining chakra suppression seals melted away like a drop of water on a hot plate. Even as the restraint seals burned away, Naruto kept the steady flow of chakra going. He was sure that if he didn't do anything now, Jiraiya would notice the next time he came by and stop it completely. If he wanted to be able to do anything important, he needed to fill up his body's huge stores of energy as soon as possible. Besides, he did not like to be weak, and he wouldn't stay holed up in the hospital longer than he absolutely had to. He thought he had at least an hour before food would be brought to him, so he could gather enough to trick the medical nin. When his chakra was restored, he knew that his overall healing would speed up, and if that meant staying in Sage Mode for longer, he figured he wouldn't be moving for a while. He still had his clones for everything else. Come to think of it, whatever happened to the one he had sent out the day before? "I'm still hungry, this sucks." Naruto's clone sighed in defeat as he got up from his cramped position, glancing around the corner. When he thought about a good bowl of ramen, it made his mouth water, and he could almost smell it on the wind. Oh, he really could smell it. Naruto was out of his hiding place and back on the street before he realized it. For a moment, he thought about using the boar disguise, but if the other Anbu knew about Ichiraku and met people there, that could make it very easy for them to find him. No, he would need something less obvious. Maybe a civilian. Or something right in the middle. The ramen stand had been erected remarkably quickly, Naruto thought as he approached his favorite restaurant in the guise of an academy student. His chakra was low enough that people would just imagine him above average if they even checked, he'd guess. The paint had just finished drying, and the Kyuubi attack was still visible in the soil around the building.
Still, Ichiraku's was open again, and dozens of people were amicably eating there, clearly glad that not everything had changed. Naruto was glad to hear that active shinobi got a discount and that there was a fund for people who had lost family members or homes. Then he pouted when he found out that, even though he was supposed to be a student at the academy, he wasn't eligible for the discount. Figures.
Tucci seemed to have noticed his unintentional pout right away. He gave him a cup of miso with a friendly smile, and Naruto decided to repay the kindness as soon as he could. He saw some people look at him with pity, and Naruto knew what they were thinking. After all, the attack left a lot of children without parents. Naruto listened carefully to the conversations going on around him as he forced himself to eat slowly. Unlike most days, he couldn't just eat a dozen bowls of ramen all at once. Even more so since he was here to try the food. It was unsettling to hear what people had to say, since most of them were very sad and the few times they laughed, they did so by force. It seemed like people were dying to talk to someone, anyone. Normal life was still a long way off, and almost everyone had lost someone in the attack, so the only people could count on were the ones who were still there. Most of them talked about the damage to the village or where they were that night. When they talked about Kyuubi, the hate was never far away. At least a little, Naruto could see why people had hated him so much when he was younger. Also, they talked about the fourth Hokage. A regular person at the stand asked a platinum blonde kunoichi, "Do you think he's still alive?" With hopelessness in his eyes. The clone kept slowly eating his ramen, even though he wanted to eat it all in a few gulps so he could hear what was going on. The kunoichi moved awkwardly, looked around, and then spoke in a way that sounded like he was hiding something. "I'm just a chunin, and they haven't told us anything either. I guess that's a good sign. If he had died, you'd think they would have told us." "Maybe, but I guess no one knows anything," Tucci said with a smooth voice as she handed the kunoichi her own bowl of ramen. "There must be an unofficial story, though, because there always is. I've heard every rumor you can think of, but the average person doesn't know much about what the shinobi do." "Unofficial, huh?" The kunoichi shook her head, her forehead protector shining in the dark. "As far as I know, Hokage-sama is still in the hospital, recovering from the Kyuubi's attack. I saw him when they brought him in. Sandaime Hokage-sama was with him, and he looked," she grimaced. "He was cut all the way through, and there was hardly any skin left on him. He looked awful." An older man, probably in his 50s, ate the last of his bowl quickly and loudly while coughing over and over. "I've heard that he was hurt too badly to be a ninja again, which makes sense. He has no skin, so I think the third will take over again, at least until someone else is ready." The kunoichi gave a shrug. "I don't know, but I think he will make it. He beat a Biju and stayed alive long enough to get to the hospital, and we all remember Iwa. Nothing can stop the Hokage after that, not even a demon, so I think he will make it." "But what if he doesn't?" Naruto asked all of a sudden. He spoke in a way that showed how naive he was as a child. He was a young student at the academy, after all. The third is just as famous as Hokage-sama, so wouldn't it be the same as before? "But the fourth is different," said a civilian woman, and a few other people nodded in agreement. "You were too young to understand it all, but in the last war, Hokage-sama was a one-man army, and it was because of that war that he became the leader of the village, even if not in name. I fear that if he dies, Konoha will probably go to war again when the other nations smell blood," she sighed. "Trust me, you don't want to go to war. I lost my brother in the last one, and I won't go to another." Naruto looked at his bowl, and all of a sudden his food didn't taste good. He knew that look of loss and hope at the same time. For most of his life, he had seen the trouble of war and the deaths of people he knew. He wouldn't want that to happen to anyone. "Namikaze-sama has kept us safe during the short time he was Hokage," said the old man. Before anyone could object, he put up his hand. "I'm not saying anything bad about the other Hokages, who were all great in their own ways. But no one can deny the fourth's dedication to the village. Look at what he just did to stop that hellish creature. He almost died protecting us. If they have to, all Hokages are expected to give their lives," the kunoichi said. "All shinobi, but especially those in charge, are expected to put the village first. Namikaze-sama said that at his inauguration, didn't he?" The old man put his eyes shut. "That's right. I remember when the last two Hokages took over," he said in a thoughtful tone. "Sarutobi-sama and Namikaze-sama are so similar in some ways. They both love the village and everything it means to them, and they are willing to go through hard times for it. However, the third knows that like me," he smiled. "He's starting to get grumpy." "You old dog," a woman said next to him. "You know that Sarutobi-sama is still the strongest shinobi alive." The old man muttered, "Maybe," and gave a soft nod. Whether or not he was powerful, he chose Namikaze-sama as his replacement because he realized the same thing as you, don't you think? That giving orders and fighting are things that young people should be doing, not us old people." Naruto once more looked down at his bowl. He knew that his father was dead, but he couldn't say that right away, could he? People wouldn't believe him, and even if they did, his words would break their hearts at a time when they were already hurting. His father had already made a good name for himself, and becoming Hokage only made that reputation stronger in the minds of both civilians and shinobi. This was probably one reason why people still hated the fox so much years later. They had lost hope for peace, which had seemed so bright after the last war. When you think about all the long and complicated fights that happened after the attack, they were also not wrong. The killing of the Uchiha was just one sign of a bigger problem. Tucci put a new bowl in front of the old man and said, "Have this, it's on the house. Let's all hope that when the mess is cleaned up, we'll also know what's going on with the Hokage. A toast to the man who saved the village." Naruto gave a weak smile as cups clinked and cheers rang out around him. He was lost in thought. After taking a long way to get to his destination to save a dog from drowning and help a couple of people cross flooded streets, Naruto thought he was ready to get back to more difficult tasks and went to get a mission scroll. It might have been a little too close for comfort, but he really wanted to give Chuki his money back. He could either risk getting a D-rank cleanup mission at the mission desk or steal it from someone else, which wouldn't solve anything. He thought for a moment about whether or not it was time to go back to the boss, but decided not to. He didn't know if his creator could even make more clones at this point, and he could be killed at any time by remote control. At the very least, his long stay showed him that the clones were more stable when there were fewer of them. He thought, though, that no one else had quite as much experience with the jutsu. Naruto was getting close to where he needed to go when he saw a huge hole in one of the buildings next to the Hokage Tower. It could have been his imagination, but it seemed strangely familiar, and he didn't understand why. He suddenly smiled when he realized that in the future, that building would be rebuilt with a different roof than it had before. This was where he got his start as a shinobi. This was where he stole the scroll of seals from Oji-san the night he learned the Kage Bunshin, the home of the Hokage. He got an idea from that. Just as Naruto went through the hole in the roof, lightning flashed again in the sky and thunder sounded all over the village. No one heard him playfully slide on the wet floor, end the move with a roll, and land on a pile of rubble in an awkward way. He laughed as he told himself to be more careful. Even if there wasn't any real danger, he could still accidentally pop himself. Naruto carefully looked around for his father's seal, the Hiraishin's connection, which could be felt even from far away if you knew how. It was an exercise he used to learn the technique in the first place. He couldn't jump through space and time until he was able to connect with a seal. After what happened last time, he was a little hesitant to try it again unless it was an emergency. He liked to think back on those training days, though. He would sometimes have Konohamaru hide all of his special kunai, and Naruto would look for them all over the village. Over time, his range would slowly grow. This time, it wasn't a game, and he could use a special kunai or two because it would work better than the seals he could place by hand, which only lasted a short time and didn't cover a large area. One of the kunai was with Boss at the hospital, and since he knew exactly where it wasn't hard for him to sense it. Since it was left out in the open for him, it was probably set up to hurt him, but it still counted. But there was another one nearby that he could feel right now, even though his senses were still not very good. As Naruto moved around the room, trying to figure out where he felt the seal, the roof swayed back and forth, threatening to fall on him. Naruto swore because he was sick and tired of everything around him falling apart. Today, it seems like fate is really out to get me, doesn't it? He used his chakra to follow the seal to a tall pile of rubble, most of which was a collapsed wall that had held a small secret compartment. He quickly dug in and moved the pieces of twisted metal out of the way as he continued to look. He finally saw a flash of bright steel and reached in to grab the three-pronged kunai. He pulled then. It made it, but it didn't do it alone. In all honesty, it might not have been his fault. The storm had been trying to bring the building down for a long time. The roof swayed as the wall suddenly sagged more, and with a sudden rush of water, it broke and fell down in one heart-stopping moment. Naruto swore a lot and rolled out from under the crumbling building just in time to avoid a shower of splintered wood and broken clay tiles. Before he could stop and think about what he was doing, he jumped out of the hole he had just climbed into. He fell through the rain and slid along what was left of the roof. Soon, he heard cracking sounds. Everything was falling apart under him, and he was losing his balance. He moved like his life depended on it, and he couldn't stop his face from turning red when he thought about how Boss would react later. The clone was glad he wasn't here to see it because he would have been fired right away. His henge fell somewhere along the way, revealing the Anbu mask he had taken for himself. He was about to put on the mask of an academy student, which was probably the best way to get away with things he shouldn't, when he heard a loud crash behind him and was forced to move again. He dashed down the walls, barely able to stay on them until he reached solid ground. A bright flash of lightning shot through the sky. Naruto stopped moving, and all the other sounds stopped. One of the Anbu, this time the real rat, stood right in front of him. The man looked right at him and didn't move an inch, so Naruto sighed and gave up. So, he had been caught. He quickly changed his mind and said that he was still wearing his boar Anbu mask. With all the excitement, his hood had come off, revealing his bright blonde hair, and he was still holding a three-pronged kunai. And, He was running away from the upper floor of the Hokage residence, which had been destroyed by accident. Crap. He quickly used Kawarimi no Jutsu to flash back to the top of the building, where he switched places with a loose clay tile. He could feel how much chakra this took, and he was quickly running out. As he jumped again toward the monument, the rain washed the dust away from his path. There, he should be able to slip through the heavy rain and get away. Rat might think that he had done something wrong. He could hear quick steps coming from behind. Hard luck. Naruto stiffened as he ran up the stone wall and made 2 quick jumps over his father's face. He thought for a moment about what he would do if he were Rat. Follow, or do you need help? When he was on top of the monument and ready to jump at full speed, he heard a voice from behind that was much closer than he expected. Stop. Wait. Naruto turned back toward him reluctantly, but he knew he couldn't get away from this person while he was hurt. Rat seemed to be quick. The figure stood in front of him with his hands in his pockets. It looked like the mask on his face was crying because of the rain. Naruto didn't say a word, even though water was running down his head. He didn't bother putting on any henge because he had already been seen without it. He shook his head tiredly and looked like he was about to pass out. It had been a long time coming. It wasn't on purpose, Naruto carefully replied, trying to guess how the rat would react. He didn't know, but he might have been able to talk himself out of this. Hopefully. The building was falling to pieces. He saw the eyes of the Anbu move to the kunai in his right hand. Minato? The voice's tone was no longer completely neutral. What are you doing out there? Naruto frowned. Not only did the voice sound vaguely familiar, but he was also sure that he saw the request to confirm his identity, in Anbu code.
Decisions. I am not Minato, he answered carefully, and then cursed his tongue for saying something so simple. At least, he did the sign for friend after that.
Rat answered, I know that much. Now, Naruto got a response he hadn't been expecting. So, you're a Kage Bunshin, right? The clone asked, how do you? In a suspicious way. The user was copied perfectly by a Kage Bunshin. No one could tell at a glance which one was the real one. Not even the Byakugan could say that.
Rat made a motion toward Naruto's legs. You are hurt. I can see bandages under your clothes, and the way you move shows that you have a serious chest wound that you try to hide. But from the moment I saw you last night until now, you haven't bled. The strain of holding that beam should have torn open your wounds, but there was not a single drop. Your bandages stayed exactly the same color as they were before.
Again, Naruto just opened his mouth wide and thanked his lucky stars for the mask. He hadn't expected an answer at all, let alone one that was so well thought out. Also, the Kage Bunshin's ability to bleed was something he hadn't thought about. Then he figured out what Rat had said. Wait, you knew I was in the village before, and you didn't stop me? The rat was happy. Yes, the wounds themselves were suspicious, he said with a shrug. I just went through the Anbu files a few hours ago, and I didn't see anyone with a pattern of injuries like yours, at least not in our ranks. If I had said anything, it might have gotten out of hand, so I thought it was best to keep an eye on things. I guess you would have just run off. I see, Naruto said after he heard the rat's voice and saw how he was standing. I'm sorry that I once used you as a disguise. I hope I didn't hurt you, Junichi-san. Rat, Sarutobi Junichi, laughed and said, You, never, he said, pausing and tilting his head slightly to the side. I'm just wondering when my father will let you out of the hospital. When they brought you in, there wasn't much healthy skin left, but here you were already sending clones into Konoha to save people. Didn't you just wake up yesterday? Rat asked slowly. Then, his eyes, which were the only thing you could see, lit up with surprise. He doesn't know that you made a Kage Bunshin, does he? That's against the rules of the hospital, right? Well, you should come out soon. The people could use your help. Naruto groaned and scratched his head. You're not really listening to what I'm saying, are you? I've already told you. I know, Kage Bunshin, but if a clone can do all this, I think we'll get news soon, Junichi said. Naruto tried to answer, but Junichi cut him off again. I think Fugaku-san put a few things together, too, especially when you mentioned the Will of Fire monument. You might want to stop rumors. Does everyone, for the third time? Rat laughed. Trust me, I've only ever seen a fellow Anbu. Don't worry, I'll clean up the mess in the Hokage residence for you. If anyone has the right to wreck that place, it's you. The Anbu got most of your stuff out anyway, so you can just pick it up later. Before Naruto could say anything else, He flipped backwards, jumped off the monument in one swift move, and waved as he disappeared. Later, Hokage-sama. Naruto would have pulled out his hair out of anger if that wouldn't have made him disappear. He yelled at the howling winds, "You people are impossible." But thunder ate his angry words. He put the Hiraishin kunai in his pocket with a painful sigh and flopped down on the wet stone one, which was actually the fourth's head, putting down another one of his father's temporary seals. Just to be safe. He muttered to himself as he ran his hand through his bright blonde hair, "We are not that similar." Even though there were still dark clouds in the sky when it got dark, the storm finally stopped its relentless attack. It was a bit of a relief after the downpour Konoha had just been through, and even though it was cold and the streets were flooded, many people were still outside. The half-full evening moon started to shine through the darkness of the sky. Naruto thought that the end of the rain had shown people that life goes on, so many of them left their homes this evening. Jiraiya walked slowly on top of one of the running streams, using the flow of the water to make his steps easier. He didn't seem to care at all when he saw some civilians wading in ankle-deep water. He was quiet and had his arms crossed. He was thinking hard. Even though the white-haired nin had taken a roundabout way to get there, the man's current destination seemed to be the nearest bathhouse. In the closest falling shadows of the evening, where the night lanterns didn't reach, Naruto's watched the Sennin with interest while also looking at everything else around him. Now that his chakra was so low, he could probably pass for a normal person. After Junichi left, the clone did a few minor D-rank missions as a genin to pay off his debt. After that, he moved on to more reconnaissance, since he had mostly forgotten about his real purpose for a while. Jiraiya seemed like a good choice, and he narrowed his eyes as he thought about what he had learned so far. Ero Sennin often took a long way to get to his destination, but he usually had a reason for doing so. He knew this from all the years they traveled together. Naruto wanted to know what he was looking for in this flooded part of town, where most people had gone to find drier places to sleep for the night. Naruto had never really tried to follow Jiraiya before because when he had the chance, he was still a genin who wasn't very well trained, and by the time the Fourth Shinobi World War was over, Jiraiya was long gone. Now, though, it seemed like too good a chance to pass up. The clone gave himself a sly grin. Jiraiya was good, but the man didn't have a henge. Even if he could, Naruto was still wearing his real Anbu uniform and mask, which added to his anonymity, but he didn't think his old teacher would be fooled for long. The clone took a second to catch his breath by leaning against the nearest wall. He gave Jiraiya another look. The memorial stone, the clone thought to himself when he saw a certain shape in the distance. He was not used to the buildings around it, but he thought they would probably be torn down soon and not rebuilt. Will he get there? Naruto quickly used a shunshin to get much closer. He was almost silently panting as he leaned against a wall for protection. Naruto had to steady himself again as he climbed onto the broken roof of a building that had fallen down. Boss was hurt pretty badly, and on top of that, he had been working himself to the point of exhaustion since last night. Still, Jiraiya hadn't even looked his way, which was odd. Ero Sennin was on his way straight to was that Kakashi? Under the mask, the clone smiled weakly. For a moment, it seemed like this younger Kakashi was always showing up wherever he went. When Jiraiya put his hand on Kakashi's shoulder, he actually jumped. Naruto quietly laughed. Sloppy. Grief and pain usually made it harder to concentrate on tasks, so maybe that was the reason. On the other hand, he knew that Jiraiya would never be so careless. Perhaps it was all just a game? That's a scary idea. Jiraiya had to be looking into him, which could have meant he knew Kakashi broke into the hospital and wanted more information. That could be bad news, because if Jiraiya knew Junichi shouldn't have been in the hospital at that time and put two and two together. He had to think that Jiraiya knew what he was doing. There were just too many places where he could have messed up without realizing it. Behind the mask, Naruto gave a smile. It would be the same as training with the pervert with white hair when they went on their trip together, except this time he had a chance to beat Ero Sennin at his own game.
On a brighter note, the clone was sure of two things. First, he didn't know many people besides Ero Sennin and Oji-san who could hide from him so well, and second, Rat hadn't told anyone about their conversation, or else that information would have gotten back to those people. Try not to think about it too much. The clone moved a little farther back and stopped moving altogether. With a small flick of his chakra, he made the wind bring the sounds closer so he could hear the conversation better. At the same time, his own breathing stopped. It wasn't really a jutsu, but more of a way for people with a wind nature to control their chakra. Like water walking, it had been useful many times.
Jiraiya asked Kakashi, "Where is your friend?" The clone laughed a lot at Kakashi's attempts to make a blank face behind the black mask that covered most of his face. He would get better at it in the future, but it was clear that he wasn't there yet. It would have fooled anyone who didn't know the Junin, but not Jiraiya, who raised an eyebrow in doubt. He kept saying, "Made a guy, of course, the loud green one. Who is he?" "Probably sleeping, training, or sleeping while training. He does that," Kakashi said reluctantly, putting on a careless attitude and a blank look. He took out the newest Icha Icha book in one smooth motion and held it high so the few raindrops wouldn't touch the pages, only the leather covers. "Now that you're here, maybe you could sign this?" Jiraiya shook his head, and Kakashi shrugged and opened the book in the middle. "What do you need Guy for, anyway? What if I told you that he is accused of treason against Konoha?" Ero Sennin said the words slowly. Kakashi was able to keep a straight face that didn't give anything away. The clone thought that might have something to do with the book he was holding. There had to be a reason why he took it out in the first place. Maybe it was just a way to train after all. Or Kakashi was already a pervert. "I think Guy would rather die than betray Konoha in any way," Kakashi said, turning the page. "But no matter what, I still have no idea where he is." Jiraiya gave a thin grin. "You didn't know that he attacked and knocked out an Anbu guard and camped out in a place where no one was supposed to be?" he asked. "And who could have been with him, since it was the work of 2 intruders, not just 1? Kakashi put the book away and turned around to face the older nin straight on. Not a clue. They stared at each other for a while they stood there. Kakashi, who was smaller and had only one eye that glowed from the light of a nearby lantern, and Jiraiya, who had a long white mane of hair that moved in the wind. "Good. Keep it that way." Jiraiya gave up suddenly, crossing his arms and giving Kakashi one last look. "I'm not going to give you 2 an official scolding, but you shouldn't do that again. You were lucky that nobody pulled a gun on you." Kakashi blinked. "It makes sense that you went in," said the Toad Sage. "I know you wanted to see Minato, believe me." The clone moved slightly in place. Jiraiya thought he was his father? Again. Did the crazy hermit really believe OG Crazy San's theory that he was a confused Minato, or was he just looking for information? Kakashi didn't answer. He just turned his head a little bit toward the memorial stone. There, a few names must have been added just recently, because the stone looked like it had just been carved, and the new names shone brightly in the moonlight, defying the darkness and shadows. Kakashi then looked at the stone with a strange look in his eye and asked, "Do you think he'll make it? Will Sensei get well again?" Jiraiya then frowned and thoughtfully rubbed his chin. "I don't know, so what do you think?" "If I had seen him," Kakashi said, choosing his words very carefully, "I think there's a chance, but I don't think he's sure himself. The village needs him to watch over them, though." He turned away. He whispered, "I need him." Jiraiya almost didn't noticeably nodded. "He taught you what he knew, didn't he? Either way, you'd still have that." Kakashi gave a half-hearted glare. "Just let me know when you can, okay?" There was more silence. It was a lot longer and a lot more awkward.
The older nin broke the silence by saying, "Fine, I'll promise. Go do some work, kid. We need every nin who can help with the repairs. The village will be busy for a long time. We'll need to rebuild schools, walls, and whole streets, and the people will need even longer to get over it, if they do." This wasn't really a war, but it felt like one to the people who live here.
Kakashi did not move. Jiraiya said in a harsher tone, "That was not a suggestion. Or I might remember things I chose to forget." Kakashi grumbled, "Yes, sir," and jumped to the nearest roof. Jiraiya stayed at the memorial stone and reached out for a moment before turning and staring straight into Naruto's eyes. Naruto almost jumped when he saw that. The man with white hair smiled wide and pointed to his side. "I can see you up there, pig. Come." Naruto looked down at the street from his roof and cringed. Jiraiya just stood there and stared at him. "Well, why don't you hurry up?" Reluctantly, the clone made his way down from the roof. He flipped off the top and landed easily on a stream of water, using his chakra to support himself. He immediately got into the right shape for his character. He wanted to laugh on the inside, even if it would have been a nervous laugh. The clone quickly went through his memories of the last day and thought about how likely it was that Jiraiya would know who he was. The answer was clear. It was almost impossible for the Ero Sennin, whose specialty was spying, to avoid Jiraiya's notice. "Yes, Jiraiya-sama." He asked in a toneless voice that he had heard from many Anbu. The tone didn't reveal anything, but it also sounded a little bit dismissive. The Sannin smiled and looked up at the cloudy night sky. His white hair moved with the wind as he looked into the distance, where smoke still rose up, touched with silver from the moonlight. When Naruto saw how Jiraiya was looking, he smiled like he did when he was not wearing his mask. Do you need help finding the frog mask to keep this conversation going? Jiraiya took a deep breath and shook his head before saying the next thing. You have been a busy bee, haven't you? I'll take that as a no, said the clone, seeing that he was right on target. What do you think Fukasaku would think of your disguise? Jiraiya had his arms crossed. It's funny that you should bring him up, because I just had a long, interesting conversation about you with Fukasaku. Naruto said, oh? In a very elegant way. I guess he didn't know me? No, Jiraiya said, shaking his head. Still, he was more than willing to make some guesses, and he suggested a fun experiment to figure out a few things. Naruto scratched the back of his neck and thought, well, what was that then? Oh, I guess I should have said that myself. You checked the Toad contract, right? If I could call Gamatora when I needed him, that might mean that my name is still on the contract. That doesn't make much sense, but I hadn't thought about it, he frowned. Now that I think about it, it shouldn't have worked at all. Jiraiya smiled. But it would still back up some of what you said, wouldn't it? I know I can trust toads, after all. The clone asked anxiously, what was it? Jiraiya laughed. I'll show it to your real self later. Better keep you guessing, right? Naruto pouted. I forgot that you don't play fair, Arrow Sennin. As soon as I get a chance, I'll tell Fukasaku about the frog mask. What do you think the toads would think if you wore that? Jiraiya grimaced. So, you saw through that disguise. Did you also realize that the orders you were given were fake? I honestly expected you to cross the walls and run away the first chance you got. That's why I set them up in the first place. Any good spy would use such an opening to get information to his superiors, even if it meant risking his own safety. Oh, said the clone, shrugging. I forgot about them in all the excitement, but I put it off because I thought there might be something fishy about them. Jiraiya sighed, of course. And instead of running away, you did something useful. People needed my help, Naruto said with an owl-like look in his eyes. When exactly did Jiraiya figure out what he had been doing? I guess you had time during the night to find me. Were you with the Anbu again? Jiraiya said, you know I won't answer that. But I'm curious about something you could tell me. When you talked to Kakashi back in the hospital, why did you lie to him in that way? He narrowed his eyes and crossed his arms. If you say you are Naruto, what made you say those things to a boy you must know is hurting? Naruto was glad he had the mask on because his face turned as white as paper all of a sudden. What? I'm sorry. Jiraiya let out a sigh as he sagged. Of course, he said. His smile wasn't very friendly. You are a Kage Bunshin, so you don't know anything about that conversation, do you? That's such an easy way out. Naruto shook his head. He didn't know what the boss had been doing while he was away, and he didn't want to talk about it. He wondered what Kakashi and the boss had talked about that Kakashi wouldn't even bother to tell Jiraiya about it. Alright, then, be the quiet one, Jiraiya muttered. I'll ask your real self about that, he said, pausing to look out at the wreckage and sighing. You've had enough time to learn a lot about the village and its people. What do you think of Konoha, Naruto? Please say what you think. Naruto frowned as he looked at the muddy streets and the broken down buildings that still needed to be rebuilt. They're weak, down, and, I guess, without direction. Jiraiya nodded. Why do you think that is? He asked, a small smirk returning to his face. If the village doesn't know where it's going, as you say, what's the real reason? The attack happened more than a week ago, and the village has been hit by big disasters before, but it's always recovered. Naruto gave a sigh. He frowned. I guess it's because they don't know what will happen to the village. If the villagers thought the fourth was dead, they might be able to move on and start rebuilding. But right now, they don't know what to think when all they see is Oji-san trying to slow things down. That's probably why Junichi-san had such a hard time with the Uchiha earlier. I'm sure you know what was going on with me, too. You're too good of a spy to have missed that commotion. Naruto turned toward the memorial stone and bent down to touch it with his fingers, which were slowly drying out. He traced the name of his mother, Uzumaki Kushina, and then looked to the empty space where many names were still not written. These were the names of people who would join his mother in the future as people who died in the service of the village. You should have added Dad to the stone, Naruto said as he clenched his fist and his voice shook a little. He took a deep breath to get his balance. You know as well as I do that he was one of the best shinobi who ever lived. Letting the village think they might see him again is too much a lie. You know who I am now. Just tell them he died in the hospital. It's better to end it in one decisive strike than to let them go on like this. It's cruel. Jiraiya looked at the memorial stone with a sad face and didn't say anything for a while. He turned to Naruto at last. You and I know that Minato is dead. We know what that foolhardy hero did for everyone. But the villagers and most of the shinobi only know that he beat the creature and drove it away. Already, stories of his victory are spreading, and not just in Konoha. It's not as easy to end things now. Naruto gave a puzzled frown. What do you mean? You have heard the villagers talking, and spies or people who travel between villages are spreading rumors. People talk a lot about the damage that was done here, but Minato was always a popular person, and now he is credited with beating the strongest of the Biju. That kind of news will make every village nervous. Naruto shivered, and an unsettling thought came to his mind. You're saying that if you tell people that dad is dead, other countries probably won't believe you because all the rumors say the opposite. They just think Konoha is taking advantage of the situation.
Jiraiya's eyes got sharper, and this time he smiled for real. You've got a head on your shoulders, huh? You're right, and the reason the rumors started in the first place was because of you. So I expect your full cooperation with whatever we decide to do about this, because we will have to deal with the fallout no matter what.
Naruto cocked his head to the side and said, You've lost me. As sad as it is, Dad is dead. The other cages might not believe it at first, but it won't be long before even other countries stop talking about him when he doesn't show up again. Jiraiya was sure. They won't wait that long to act. Other countries would use a weakness like this as a reason to go to war. If Sarutobi-sensei were to take back his position and become Hokage again while rumors of Minato's survival still spread, he would be seen as a stand-in, a figurehead. And the villagers probably wouldn't be happy about the third regaining power while they still believe the fourth is alive. We can't use war, but civil war would be even worse. It makes sense that I'd make things worse, Naruto said in a dark voice. So we're doomed either way, he groaned. Tell people that the fourth is dead, and they won't believe it. Don't tell them, and they won't let anyone else take over for him. Great. All we need to do now is bring the dead back to life. Jiraiya's face got even more serious as she said, No, we can't do that, but it's not impossible. Minato was popular, but he was only Hokage for a short time, and he had a small but close-knit group of friends. He is known more for his reputation than his experience. Naruto's eyes got big when he realized what it meant. Oh, no. You can't be thinking what I'm thinking, he started to say. No way will OG-san put up with that. I won't put up with it, either. Jiraiya looked at him and raised one eyebrow. I can tell you're his kid, you know. The way you talked down to Fugaku, that's what Minato would have done. You probably made him suspicious as hell with that little act. You have a way with people that's not that different from his, even if you have your mother's temper. Your father was famous for how well he could handle people, almost anyone. We need someone like that, even if you aren't exactly like him. We need stability so we can start over, Jiraiya said in a calm voice. It's hard to win the trust of civilians, but it's easy to keep them. We need their faith to make a village work again. Naruto said nothing. I can tell that you really care about Konoha, Jiraiya said. Don't get me wrong. I'm not offering you a job, because that would be rude. I'm just giving you a mission to think about, and I'll keep an eye on it anyway. You fooled Kakashi in the hospital, so I don't think it's too hard for you. He paused to let the words sink in. Think about it, and don't step out of line again or I'll lock up your chakra again. I know your real self broke my seals, so don't do it again. Why are you pushing for this kind of solution? The clone asked as he thought about the crazy idea Jiraiya was holding out in front of him. Did the toad say anything? Did the Honorable Geezer make another prediction? Jiraiya crossed his arms and said, You're too smart for your own good, and pretty annoying. Hey, Naruto said when he saw Jiraiya shifting his weight to get ready for a sudden attack. I can dismiss myself, you know, and aren't you going to answer my question? There's no new prophecy, Jiraiya glared at him. There. Can you be sparse right now? Your presence in the village has already caused too many ripples. The more you stay until we've worked out the details of a possible deal, the harder things will be.
Fine, the clone said with a scowl. But I expect you to come talk to the real me as soon as you can. I don't think the boss wants to stay in that dank room for much longer. Then he disappeared in a puff of smoke, his mask falling awkwardly into the water as Jiraiya caught the suddenly empty Anbu uniform with his left hand and grabbed the boar mask from the water a second later.
What is this? He asked himself as he pulled the three-pronged kunai out of one of the pockets. Jiraiya stuffed it into the folds of his clothes and frowned. I thought we had counted them all. A small scroll with orders that hadn't been given yet floated peacefully in the water. A lone figure walked quickly on the road to Konoha. He wasn't running, but his steps were quick and his stride was wide. It looked like he had been going at the same pace for a long time, but he didn't seem tired. As the man walked through the puddles and let the water splash around, he didn't even look at the two Konoha nin who were watching him. Even when they started following him and darted between the trees on the side of the road, he didn't care and just kept walking towards the gate. He didn't know they were there, and they weren't sure if they should show themselves to him yet. His pale face changed into a happy smirk as shadows covered his face. When the patrol finally got tired of what they thought was his ignorance, a Chunin landed on the road right in front of him and asked, "What are you doing in Konoha?" The man asked with force, his Hittite glimmering in the moonlight. "I'm just here to deliver a message," the figure said with a strange, reverberating hiss, stopping just in front of the Chunin who was holding the kunai. His next words, "A message for the Hokage," left a hint of killing intent in the air. "So, what is it? What are you?" The Chunin frowned and took a step back because the man was so strong. He almost backed away in fear, but his iron will kept him from showing it. "It's for the Hokage's ears only," he said, taking off his hat and looking at the Chunin with snake-like eyes and a smile on his sheet-white face. "You must know that much about how I come and go." "Orochimaru-sama," the Chunin said with some relief, nodding in recognition while holding back a sneer. The name made him feel equal parts respect, fear, and hatred, but he had to be professional because this man was a Konoha shinobi, even though he didn't want to think about it. "Please let the Hokage know I've arrived," the snake Sanin said as he glanced at the Chunin who stayed in the trees, ready to help if needed. "Now, if you would just get out of my sight, I didn't come here to deal with little kids. I have something to say."
A caution. Quote. Orochimaru nodded quickly and smiled amusedly at the corner of his lips. "It looks like someone is coming to get back at our respected leader quickly. I would like to talk to Minato-san as soon as he can."
As Naruto finished going over the memories of his clone, he could feel Jiraiya coming. The clone's experiences came flooding back to him in the form of quick impressions and half-remembered conversations. He didn't move from where he was sitting with his legs crossed in the middle of the cold, hard floor of his hospital room. There was no reason for him to. It was easy. His bed was too soft for good meditation, but he could easily picture himself back at the pond on Mount Myoboku when he was on a hard surface. He imagined Fukasaku keeping a close eye on him and using his stick like a club, threatening to hit him over the head at the slightest imbalance of energies. From far away, natural energy poured in, and he could feel everyone for miles around him. Every twinkling blur was a shinobi. He could even feel his other, much younger self being cared for in another part of the hospital, though it was far away. Jiraiya came in at that exact moment, but he wasn't as sneaky as usual. He opened the door with a loud slam and a cheesy smile, but he stopped in his tracks when he saw that the person he was looking for wasn't in bed. Naruto jerked his eyes open and looked at the older man with a questioning look, but he didn't seem surprised at all. That was very rude. Jiraiya yelled, "1,000 picked toads!" After looking at Naruto's perfected sage mode for a moment. He noticed the long pupils, the orange pigment around his eyes, and the clear presence of natural energy in the air around them. The man seemed speechless for a moment, and his raised hand fell to his side. The next second, without even the slightest warning, Naruto's hand shot out and caught a kick that the ninja with white hair was trying to land on the back of his head. As the bunshin in front of him faded away, he looked over his shoulder with a hint of irritation. That was much worse. "Good block," Jiraiya said quickly as he straightened up and gave a sheepish smile. "I'm sorry. I won't do that again. Please forgive me." Naruto moaned. What the hell was that for, Arrow Sennin? As he shook his hand more in irritation than pain. Still, he knew from the dull pain in his hand that if he hadn't been using Sage Mode, the attack would have probably killed him. His old teacher had not been shy, that was for sure. Naruto was once again shown how strong his teacher was, even though he didn't act like it. Jiraiya looked down at Naruto with a mean face. "You're using natural energy," he yelled as if that was the key to understanding his sudden attack. "Even Sage Mode. I didn't even get all the way through it," he said after a short pause. So, you were my apprentice after all, and you were a damn good one, it seems. Of course I was, Naruto muttered as he got to his feet and turned around. With his hard, toad-like eyes and blood-stained bandages, his brave stance was even more impressive than usual. He said, "It's not like I've never done this Sage Mode thing before. The toads on Mount Myoboku taught me how to balance energies a long time ago, and you gave me the job." Jiraiya had his arms crossed and was frowning. "That may be true, but you should have told me you were going to do this. It's too dangerous to try to use natural energy alone, since you could turn to stone if you do it wrong. Also, you just took a big hit, so what if you overcompensated for the loss of the Kyuubi? What would you do without anyone around to fix it?" Naruto cocked his head to the side and asked in shock, "You were trying to hit me to drain my energy? Don't you need a special kind of wood for that, like the old man Fukasaku does with that nasty stick?" Jiraiya said, "No," and then he gave a wink. "Not if you know the details. Oh well, the teacher still has a few legs up on the student, eh?" Naruto wasn't sure if his toadish teacher was telling the truth, but he didn't think it was important. He waved his arm again, which still hurt, and sighed. "Now, I'm sure that trying to kick the stuffing out of me was one of your brilliant spur-of-the-moment ideas, but keep it to yourself next time." He muttered something insulting under his breath, then stopped. "Why were you in such a hurry?"
Jiraiya said, "Ah, yes," and put his hand to his chin while rolling his eyes. Naruto had seen this move a lot on their travels, and it was usually a sign that a man was up to no good. "I need to get a few things straight before we run out there and meet everyone, but things are going a little faster than I had hoped. It can't wait, I'm afraid."
Naruto raised an eyebrow and said, "Well, that was very vague. So you're not going to say what made you run in the first place? Are you trying to keep me guessing? If you don't ask the right way, I won't tell." The white-haired ninja gave Naruto a short, teasing smile that seemed to be real. "Listen, it's true that we don't have much time left before we have guests. You've said that you know what's going to happen, and I can't let something like that go unspoken. I need you to be honest with me here." Naruto took a deep breath and thought about what would happen if he just said what would happen to someone in the past. He had to admit that Jiraiya-sensei was the only person he knew for sure he could trust. No matter what else he was, talking too much wasn't one of them, unless he wanted it to be. If he promised to keep a secret to himself, he would never tell anyone.
Naruto said, "Fine." He was trying to figure out why Jiraiya had come in so quickly after leaving his clone so calmly. Naruto raised an eyebrow when Sasuke said, "I can tell you a few things if you promise not to act hastily on what I tell you. I'm guessing that the third is somewhere else, and you couldn't wait any longer for him to come back, so you ran right here. You're playing up the familiarity, too, so you can tug at my heartstrings and all that."
The fact that Jiraiya didn't say anything was enough proof. "I'm not going to ask any more questions, but only because I trust you so much," he said. He waited a moment, then nodded. "Before we talk about the future, there is something my father asked me to tell you." Jiraiya stopped breathing for a second, and his eyes got very big. "You mean from Minato?" "Yeah. Dad said you should stay the way you were," he said with a small smile. As he thought back to that meeting inside his seal, his voice took on the same tones that his father had used without him even realizing it. "I guess that even though you were lecherous and annoying, he still liked you. What did he say about you again?" "He said you were cheerful in danger, serious in council meetings, and wise when it mattered. He said your heart was always in the right place." Jiraiya took a deep breath and hissed, "When?" Naruto put up his hand to stop his teacher for a moment. "He also told me that you fixed more wrongs while traveling around the world than he did in his short time as the fourth Hokage. He seemed to think that you could handle things without him." For a moment, Jiraiya closed his eyes. "Yeah, that sounds like something the sentimental idiot would say. For a second there, you looked like you were his ghost." His eyes met Naruto's, and they were sharp. "Then, did he tell you all of that when he sealed the Kyuubi?" "No, it's hard," Naruto slowly admitted. "Let's say that a little bit of my father stayed with me for a while. It took me a while to figure out what he left me, and I'm probably still figuring it out," he said as he scratched his belly. "I think he's gone, but it feels like he's still here in some ways, which is strange." Jiraiya rubbed the skin on his chin. "Well, that's got to be a great story, since talking to ghosts and the like isn't something that happens every day." "There's not much I could say to explain it," Naruto said, thinking of the echo of his father that he still didn't fully understand. A last bit of chakra with a mind of its own trapped in a seal that wasn't meant for it. When it broke up, it went into his chakra system instead of going away completely like chakra usually does. It stayed there, sometimes showing up as a random feeling or a vague memory of something he had never seen before. Jiraiya said, "I'm sure. Don't worry about that," Naruto said with a frown. "I've never seen you ask questions without a good reason, but I have to warn you that my story isn't the best. It has a good ending, I guess, as far as I can tell, but a lot of people didn't have a great future." Jiraiya nodded, and he flopped down on the floor in a squat so that Naruto could also get his weight off his legs safely. Naruto was silently grateful for this. He went into his usual pose for meditation out of habit, and Jiraiya did the same. For a moment, the two of them just looked at each other, as if they could read his every move. Naruto thought that was probably true when it came to Jiraiya. Jiraiya said, "You said I was dead," and his jaw twitched. "I bet it wasn't old age, either. At least, I hope it wasn't, because I should still have many years left. I don't want to leave my Icha books unfinished or women unseen." He winked.
Naruto smiled as he looked at his teacher's face, from the marks on his cheeks to those bright, curious eyes that he had missed a lot during the years he had been on his own.
He knew that Jiraiya was still all business even though he looked like a crazy pervert, just like he was when they were traveling together. Even in the most embarrassing places, he always had an ear to the ground. Naruto admitted that he didn't realize how much the man had taught him until a long time after the 3-year trip. If you looked hard enough, the Toad Sannin could teach you something from even the most simple tasks. Of course, it was just his luck that the first thing his teacher talked about was the part of their history that he tried so hard not to think about. Even more so now that the real version was sitting in front of him, a little less wrinkled but just as smart and cool. Naruto said softly, shaking his head, "I can tell you almost anything else, but not that. Even less so that." "Why?" Jiraiya asked simply. Naruto bit his lip. "There's no point in talking about it. It's not going to happen," he said with a sad smile. "You must understand that this is one of the things I have to stop now that I have the chance to do so, and I will. If I do nothing else now that I'm back here, at least I can do that." "I appreciate that, but after you made such a clear hint at it, you must have known it was the most obvious question I was going to ask," Jiraiya said. "If you don't tell important people important things, they might not trust you, especially the third. But it can't be that bad, can it?" "Just ask about something else," Naruto said again with a shiver. Jiraiya touched his cheek as he thought. It couldn't have happened until we had a chance to get to know each other, and I don't see myself letting a child under 14 edit my works, even if you were as smart as your father." Naruto was shocked when he looked at Jiraiya. "I have rules," said the Sannin with a smile. "Well, that gives me at least 14 years. How old are you now?" 22. Naruto said with a tired voice, 23. "Right. So I can tell from the way you avoid talking about my tragic death that it is an old, but deep, wound," Jiraiya said with a click of his tongue. "Maybe half a decade. That would be before your 18th birthday. You also mentioned Nagato, who died around the same time as me. You must have told him about these things, or he must have seen the whole thing." Naruto tried not to say anything, but his eye twitched when he thought about Nagato and his paths of pain, which were powerful enough to destroy Konoha itself, at least until he got back from training to find out who killed his teacher. He thought about telling Jiraiya what happened just to see how she would have felt about Nagato's ultimate sacrifice. "I'm on the right track, I can tell," Jiraiya said with a smile. "Sometimes no reaction is a reaction in and of itself," Naruto sighed. "So, if I find Nagato, his plans and actions would tell me something about the circumstance." He was about to say more, but was cut off. "No," Naruto said in an angry way. "Don't go looking for him." Jiraiya's reaction to his outburst made him feel bad. Momentary confusion, a whiff of intrigue, and then a very empty look of shock and sadness. His teacher was way too smart for him when he was trying to figure out a mystery and had just found the answer. "Don't go looking for him, huh?" Because Jiraiya paused and looked at Naruto's eyes with a dull face. "So, he's the one who finally got me." He slowly shook his head. Little Nagato, what in the world happened to him that he would do something like that? Naruto looked angry. He told himself that trying to keep something like that a secret from a spymaster was stupid in and of itself, especially if he wasn't ready. It was over. "Why did you have to push? It's not something I want to think about now that you're still alive." Jiraiya did not budge. It had to be talked about, so what happened? Naruto gave an uneasy shrug. "Well, the details have always been vague, but I know enough. You went on a mission to find information on a member of Akatsuki. which is a group of expensive to hire missing nin who hunt Biju on the side by doing odd jobs. You didn't know that Nagato was a part of that group, and he set a trap. You didn't make it out of it alive, he swallowed hard. You did send us a warning with the toads so we could fight Nagato when he came to Konoha. Akatsuki, eh? Jiraiya murmured, eyes narrow. Naruto looked at the Sannin in a dark way. Don't go looking for Nagato alone, sensei. He's strong, stronger than you can imagine. He might still have some good in him, but he got me so close to releasing the Kyuubi that my seal was failing. It took all of that and more just to subdue him, so it would be a hell of a fight. It was very quiet for a very long time. Jiraiya finally agreed with a grudging nod. That will have to do for now. I'll have to figure out how to talk to Nagato without walking up to him and getting in trouble. I get the feeling there's a lot of history there you're not telling me about, he said with a smile that didn't seem real. Just by looking at you, I can almost tell what you're thinking. In that way, you're a lot like your mother. Your emotional attachment has made you careless. Or is that just because it's me? Naruto looked angry. Don't make yourself feel good. Jiraiya said, yeah, I thought so. So, Nagato. I'm sorry to hear about what will happen to him in your future, but we should have enough time to change things here, since that's years away. Other things are more important right now, he said, narrowing his eyes at Naruto. You also said something that made me think for a long time. That all the Uchiha would still be alive. That's what I'd call a warning from the future. It gave me and Sensei a headache trying to figure out what you meant. Naruto inhaled deeply. You and the old man went through every word I've said since I got here, looking for clues. I guess I should have been more careful with my words. The Sannin gave a grin. Since you talk about this event as if it happened a long time ago, I think it happened when you were young, before you had any real ties to clans or anything like that, he said, ignoring Naruto's words. There isn't a full emotional connection there, but the event affected you, didn't it? Since there are a lot of Uchiha around, it must have affected everyone to some degree. Ero Sennin, you don't have to keep guessing, Naruto said slowly and with a sad face. You'd figure it out anyway. I don't know the details, but it happened when I was 7 or 8 years old. By the time I graduated, it was just called the Uchiha Massacre. It was quite a mess. Jiraiya asked with a frown. Every single Uchiha was killed. Do you know who was or who will be at fault? Naruto took a short break and turned his head to the side. He said, I would have said Uchiha Itachi, but as far as I know, he wasn't the most important person. It was said that the Uchiha were planning some kind of coup against Konoha. I don't think they are right now, not yet, but I'm sure things are getting worse. He shivered as he remembered the fight between Junichi and Sasuke's father. I was watching you, Jiraiya said in a low voice. I know what's going on with that family.
Right, well, a friend told me that the third approved of the massacre, but I never thought that the old man would agree to kill every man, woman, and child in an entire clan, Naruto said with a sad shake of his head. He may have been forced to do it. Danzo was definitely there to mess things up.
Jiraiya said, of course he was. Killing spies on a large scale and getting rid of a dangerous bloodline that can't be stopped. He'd probably be thrilled by the chance. Naruto took a moment to think about what he wanted to say, while Jiraiya stayed quiet and thought. I guess that's how things begin. After the Kyuubi attack, tensions in the Uchiha clan grew, and they would have exploded into violence if not for the massacre. I have a lot of questions that I don't know the answers to because too many people died before I could ask them, including Danzo. Obito was there, though, and maybe Uchiha Madara was involved, too. Wait. You said Uchiha Madara? You said the Uchiha Madara? Jiraiya was shocked. How? Naruto half said, half asked, Kuchiyose, Edo Tensei? And he raised an eyebrow at Jiraiya's shocked face. Yes, some improved version of the seconds technique. Don't look at me like that. Madara had something that kept him going a lot longer than he should have, some source of infinite chakra or something. I think he's the reason Obito went crazy. The massacre was part of a plan that Naruto stopped himself. No, I don't think he was trying to do what he said he was, not in the end. I never figured out what his real goals were. It's a problem that will be solved a long time from now.
Jiraiya asked, does this Uchiha massacre have roots in the present day? And his eyes suddenly lit up with understanding. Ah. When Hiruzen became Hokage again after Minato's death and had a second reign, he didn't change his mind about Uchiha matters, did he? He went back to doing things the way he'd always done them.
Pretty much, said Naruto. And that drove a wedge between that clan and Konoha. which had been there since Madara went into self-imposed exile. I've seen some of the hatred between the Uchiha and most other clans, and if it hadn't been stopped in my timeline, it might have given Obito and Madara the push they needed to start their plans. Then, Jiraiya gave a smile. He said with a wry smile, so Minato was already halfway done fixing a problem we didn't even think was important enough to pay attention to. And he says I did more? It's going to be nearly impossible to get Sarutobi to stop being suspicious of and limiting the Uchiha when they were most likely involved in this attack, even if he believed everything you said. I know, but if I can help in any way, I will, Naruto said. Any help you can give, huh? Jiraiya said with a smile. Naruto sniffed. Yes, well, in return, I'm going to need your help. I've learned most of what I know about gathering information from you, but I won't pretend that I'm anything but a frontline fighter first and foremost. The massacre and other events, I have no real way to study them without looking suspicious. I expect you are much better at that kind of thing, though, without getting caught. Of course, Jiraiya said. I do that no matter what. He stood up. As long as we're working toward the same goals, I'll do whatever you think is smart, or at least we'll talk about it. Do you remember my suggestion to your clone? Naruto stared steadily at his teacher. Yeah, me pretending to be my dad is a crazy idea, he said. Though I have thought about that idea, since you wouldn't joke about something like that. I had to get past the fact that it seemed crazy at first to understand what you were trying to say. And? It's a big lie, and I don't want to play that game, Naruto said softly. Lying to people's faces has never been my thing. He smiled. You could probably do it better just because you have more experience, he said dryly. Hey. That would mean I'd be lying to everyone, including myself, Naruto said, ignoring Jiraiya's fake anger. I'd be crazy to even try to pull it off. You know I'm neither an actor nor a politician. Most of my time as a shinobi has been spent as a bolt of destruction that you aim at whatever needs to be destroyed. Jiraiya smirked. I feel it, but coming on. Naruto groaned. Okay, I'll admit that I've caused too much trouble in the village for me to just leave, he said. Even if I had an easy way to get back home, I've already messed things up just by being here, he said. He turned away and stared at the three-pronged kunai that was sitting on a shelf next to the long white coat that his father used to wear. Really, I can't ignore what you're saying. If pretending to be someone else is what it takes to make things better. You agree with me, right? Naruto closed his eyes and made a sad face. I don't think I'll go along with your weird plan, sensei. For one, there are too many differences between us for the disguise to work. I'm Naruto, not Minato. We're different people in many ways, and I get more of my personality from my mother than from my father. Anyone who knew my dad will see through it right away. Jiraiya laughed. But when you act like your father, you look so much like him that it gives me the creeps. What's with the self-deprecation, anyway? We both know what you can do, especially after that mess with the Kyuubi. And now Sage Mode? Naruto's eyes widened like those of a toad when he saw Jiraiya. He snorted and then laughed loudly, which caught the Sannin by surprise. The white-haired ninja didn't know how to deal with the bandaged ninja who suddenly seemed happy. Did I say something wrong? That made Naruto laugh for a short time again. Arrow Sennin, you couldn't have been more wrong, he said between breaths. Self-deprecating. Me? Really? I've bragged to anyone who would listen about almost every small skill I've ever learned. You're putting things into me that aren't there. Jiraiya grinned and called him a brat. I guess I should have guessed that. Your Kushina's just like you're his, even if you seem to have a handle on her more volatile personality traits. Naruto had a laugh. Well, Kakashi-sensei called me the most unpredictable ninja in Konoha, and when I was younger, I couldn't go 5 minutes without bragging about something, mostly about becoming Hokage. I see you had a dream like your parents did. You've grown out of that habit, haven't you? Jiraiya asked. Naruto gave a shrug. No, I don't think so. There's no reason to brag when everything you say is true, he said with a wide grin as Jiraiya gave him another sharp look. Wait, you're a Hokage? Are you kidding me? Naruto stuck his tongue out and jumped up, even though his legs were telling him not to. The Sage Mode's eyes were bright and full of strong determination. You don't believe me? You don't think little old me could be Hokage? Where do you think I got the Anbu codes and all that? I thought you might have known the Anbu code because you were one of them. Maybe a squad leader, Jiraiya said. I'm not always right, you know, he said with a thin smile. But I guess that's not too strange for someone like you, given your parents. Does that mean Sarutobi can finally stop working? Naruto scratched the back of his head and made a short face. Not exactly. He died, and you and I persuaded Tsunade to replace him as Hokage. She did the job for 10 years, though the war took a toll on her. She got tired of it all and started running me through the loops just so she could relax and drink sake. I was about to be sworn in, and I wanted to show up with the Hiraishin technique. You can see where that got me. In response, Jiraiya laughed. Then it will be easy to teach you how to act like a Hokage, he winked. If you were being trained for the job, you must already know some things, right? You just need to finish your training. If Tsunadeheim thought you could do it, I bet you're just as good as your father. Naruto groaned and glared at his teacher in anger. You're just going to push me until I agree to your stupid plan, aren't you? Why do you want this so much? Do you really think I could fool everyone who knew my dad, even if I went along with this craziness? In all honesty, yes, Jiraiya said, and you'll have to prove your trust in me soon. The third and Shimura Danzo are supposed to come here for a visit, he said with a grin as Naruto's eyes suddenly grew narrow. Right, you get my point. I don't want Danzo to know about the future, and I'd rather he didn't even know it exists. Playing your father, at least for a little while, should give us time to deal with him. Do you think that the third hasn't said anything to Danzo yet? Naruto asked incredulously. Why wouldn't he? They played together, right? Yes, but Sarutobi isn't stupid. Sensei likes it when people come up with their own explanations.
He doesn't just tell everyone everything, Jiraiya said. Your existence is a mystery to him, just as it is to me, so he would be doubly careful with that information. Danzo hasn't talked to you yet, so he doesn't really know who you are. Any doubts he might have are built on very shaky ground, and if you pull off a convincing Minato, he will calm down and go back to his sewers or wherever he hides these days.
I see, Naruto cautiously said. And the third won't mind if a stranger walks around his village acting like he's the leader. I wouldn't be happy about that, he said, shaking his head. You've always had funny ideas, but this is taking it too far, sensei. Yeah. Sarutobi might disagree with my idea, but not in front of Danzo, Jiraiya said casually. If you can fool the other bandaged jerk for a few minutes, I'd bet you can fool almost anyone in the village. If there's anyone who looks and acts like Minato enough to do this, it would have to be you, his son. Plus, you do a good job of imitating his voice of authority. He winked. Of course, a properly used henge can help with the physical details. You have a lot of natural energy, so that should keep it going pretty much as long as you want. When Jiraiya crossed his fingers, a surge of chakra ran over Naruto's skin and made his eyes itch. There. It's not much, so it's not enough to get rid of those scars on your cheeks. I guess you'll have to keep them, but at least you know why they're there. Naruto sputtered, you changed my face. He was angry, and he ran his hand carefully over his cheeks, not sure if he should be able to feel the change or not. Henge was a strange technique in that way. He grumbled at Jiraiya's smile. Will there be anything left of me after all this? I don't want to just live as someone else. So, if I can't trick Danzo for you, why don't you fake it with a henge? Jiraiya said, you know that would never work. For one thing, I'm way too tall. He sighed. If you can't do it, well, then we'd be giving Danzo an advantage he'll use against us, and he'd use it pretty quickly. With no immediate successor set up, and with Sarutobi less popular because of the long delay and his reluctance to return to the post, Danzo would probably get the daimyo's approval and become the 5th Hokage. He grimaced. With the Uchiha planning our downfall in the shadows and being pushed even more by such a powerful man, they might stage a coup early, which is similar to what you say led to the Uchiha massacre. But this time it might be even worse, the man shrugged. No pressure. Naruto scowled, and all because of me. Why did I have to mess everything up? I guess you're used to outsmarting Danzo by now, aren't you? I never knew that jerk until after you know, he made a vague motion with his hand. Looking back, it's clear why you played a big part in Konoha's information network instead of just lounging around and writing your pervy books. You care about the future of Konoha, just like me and your dad. The wandering was just a way to hide. Jiraiya said in a simple way, that sounds about right. Naruto gave a small smile. You wouldn't believe how many things make sense when you know you're involved, like how Danzo couldn't get a good foothold until you were out of the picture, or why you left your hands free when you turned down the Hokage position, even though it was offered to you. Jiraiya said with a fake pout, don't tell anyone. They're going to start taking me seriously, and the next thing I know, they're going to make me do menial work and hunt cats.
I won't tell, Naruto said. He laughed briefly. but then stopped and looked at a blank wall. He felt someone new and strangely familiar coming quickly toward him. It almost felt like, but that couldn't happen because this chakra was much less dangerous and bad. It was almost normal, which was wrong. He said in a vague way, "Someone is coming."
Naruto thought about what he could do right away. He could quickly get into bed and pretend to be asleep. This would put off having to do anything, but the choice would still be his. He could also just come out and tell everyone the truth about who he was, but that would put Danzo under the Hokage's hat, which would be a disgrace. It was bad enough when he was alive. So, he was left with a third option that he didn't like and wasn't sure he could even do, even though he still had a bit of his father's voice in his eyes and words when he wasn't paying attention. If he took Jiraiya's advice and used his father's name instead of his own, he would have to live a lie and do something so foreign to him that Sakura would have laughed at him if he had said it. Everyone would know he was lying, but he had his father's blessing, as much as he could get. He knew that both versions of the fourth he had met respected him, and he also knew that the fourth inside him had known about Jiraiya's plans long before Naruto himself did. Then there was that other Naruto, who would have been an orphan without him. If he put on the fourth's cloak, he would also have to take on the role of father. He wasn't sure if he was ready for that, even though he would know the kid's tastes like nobody's business. Every night is a night for ramen.
"I still don't understand why you're playing this trick on me, sensei," Naruto said in a dark voice. "Okay. I guess I have my mom's self-control. You'll just keep pushing me until I give in, and I know you always do." "What the heck, I'll give it a shot."
He turned off Sage Mode, and in that last second he could see the chakra signatures around him more clearly than before because his mind was clear. He had been right to recognize the chakra signature that was coming toward them, but it was different enough from what he remembered that it surprised him. Naruto breathed out the name, Orochimaru, as he heard faint sounds of commotion in the hallway. Jiraiya's face lit up for a moment with a smile. Naruto felt a rush of feelings all at once. Anger, fear, and the usual confusion that seemed to follow the snake summoner everywhere he went. Orochimaru was the third Hokage's assassin, Sasuke's betraying teacher, and for a short time, an ally in the Fourth Shinobi World War. This was not that Orochimaru, though. If he was here in the village and Jiraiya wasn't after him, that meant he hadn't yet turned against the army. The third hadn't found out about him yet. Maybe he hadn't even put civilians from Konoha through trials, which was the crime that got him kicked out of Konoha and led to the creation of the Sound Village. Orochimaru was still one of the legendary Sannin right now, right here. As far as anyone knew, he was loyal. When Naruto steeled himself against the memories and feelings that tried to get out, the door was already opening, and his natural energy faded away into nothing. He started to feel worried. Danzo was one thing, since he was looking out for Konoha's best interests, even if it was for a strange reason. Orochimaru was unknown to everyone. Even though he was thinking about doing unsavory research and working with shady people, he was still loyal at this point. Naruto wondered if he could act like his father in front of someone he knew so well and who knew so much about him.
Aside from that, he wondered what the point of this visit was, since he wasn't even with the third. Why would Orochimaru, who was neither the fourth Hokage's teacher nor a close friend, come to see him in the hospital? Had he been in the village at all in the past few days? Naruto didn't think so because he was sure that if his chakra was there, he would have noticed it much earlier than now. He couldn't accuse Orochimaru of anything before he talked to Jiraiya about the situation.
Naruto knew he had to go with the flow, no matter where Orochimaru stood. He forced himself to take slow, deep breaths and calm down. He thought of the friendly smile of the person behind the bars of his seal, who was much smarter than he had ever been. Behind his own amused smile, he could almost see his father's. The pale-skinned Sannin walked into the room just as Naruto opened his eyes. The bodyguard who was stationed in the hallway was looking around the corner, not sure if he should go back to his post or sound the alarm. He couldn't have thought that two of the Sannin would just walk in. Genma was the guard in question, and Naruto knew him. He wasn't an ambu like Naruto had expected to see. That must have been done by Jiraiya. He had replaced the ambu with the official bodyguards of the Hokage, who were loyal to the person wearing the hat before anyone else, to literally root out any root members. Since Jiraiya and Orochimaru had been on the same team for a long time, this probably also explained how Orochimaru had walked right in. "Orochimaru-san," Naruto said carefully, slipping into his father's voice without hesitating. It felt almost natural, which was weird. He just slightly tilted his head, just enough to be polite but not a bit more. The move didn't show that he was nervous at all. It was nice of you to come by.
It's good to see you, Hokage-sama, the man hissed in such a way that Naruto didn't know if it was a respectful greeting or something else. The snake-like man's eyes moved to the side and got a little bit smaller. Jiraiya. The toad sage smiled and walked over to the newcomer, slapping his hand on his shoulder, which made Orochimaru angry. You're still alive. I thought you were off on one of your trips. The question that wasn't asked was, why are you here? Was in the air between them.
Genma looked at Naruto with a puzzled look, waiting for him to tell him what to do. Naruto told him to wait by using a different version of the same Anbu code that his clone had used many times before. He stopped for a moment to think about the gesture he had just made, which was meant for the Hokage guard platoon. But Tsunade hadn't taught him those things yet.
Dad, what did you do? Naruto spoke, and he tried to stay in the present. How important is the problem? He asked out loud, and Orochimaru, who was less calm than usual, looked like he was about to snap at Jiraiya for being so silly. The snake summoner turned back to Naruto, and it was impressive that he didn't show even a hint of irritation on his face. I'm sure you wouldn't be here if it wasn't important, Naruto said. You and your teammate will be able to make up for lost time later. Jiraiya said, oh, come on, I haven't seen him in at least 6 months. Can I bother him for a second? His eyes showed hesitance, as if he had just realized how dangerous his crazy plan was. So, Jiraiya was trying to make Orochimaru not think something was wrong. No way would that ever work.
Orochimaru told Jiraiya, I see you haven't changed at all, and he made a dramatic sigh. Naruto didn't fall for it. Inside, I'm sure that both of the Sannin were trying to make sense of every word and action he made. Orochimaru looked at Naruto's bandages without drawing attention to them. He measured Naruto's reactions, watched him not move around too much, and figured out what was wrong with him from those clues. He might have missed it if Naruto hadn't seen him do the same thing before. Naruto thought that the snake summoner didn't really want Jiraiya there. It was just his luck that the other Sannin used the same break in Sarutobi's schedule to meet up with his Hokage. Now, all Naruto needed was for Tsunade to come in and check on his health, and that would be it. A full set. Come on, Orochimaru-san, speak up, Naruto said easily. He smiled a little as he realized that the Sannin in front of him was clearly less experienced than the one he remembered, but probably just as strong. At the very least, he wasn't as angry as he had been in the past. I promise you that Genma won't tell anyone what you say without my permission, Naruto said. When Orochimaru's eyes got narrow, he tried not to shiver. It looked like the Sannin had decided on something. He seemed to calm down almost imperceptibly. It wasn't something Naruto would have noticed by chance, but his senses were already on high alert because he didn't want to make a single mistake. What did it mean for Orochimaru to be at ease? Was it even something good? I understand. I came to warn you, Hokage-sama. Several other messengers mysteriously disappeared on the way here, so I guess I'm the first. In short, Iwa is making a move, and it's a bold one, Orochimaru said, licking his lips with his disgustingly long tongue. It should go without saying, but they want you.
Naruto looked at Genma, who had tensed up when he heard that the Hokage was in danger. At first, he didn't think he knew the young man, but his chakra signature was a dead giveaway. He thought that the other 2 Hokage guard platoon members were also watching over the hospital. That's what I expected from Iwa. They don't like me, Naruto said with a half grimace. How long do we have left?
Orochimaru made a fake snarl with his teeth for a split second as he said, slim to none. Given how fast my summon is, I might have gotten here before them, but they might already be here. They might be waiting it out. Several runners were caught, so it's hard to tell where they are.
That means we're up against at least one elite, Naruto guessed. The fact that I was so easy on Chunin would suggest that, he said as he turned toward the door. He said, Genma, quickly, and the guard immediately stood up. The third is on his way here from the Hokage Tower. Tell him about any possible intruders in the village and keep an eye on him. Send Magpie to call a squad of Anbu to strengthen the platoon on the northern wall. Please wait for further orders from the third.
Hokage-sama. Naruto nodded. I know what your sworn duties are, but your being here won't change anything right now, he said to his friends, gesturing in a vague way. 2 of the Sannin are with me, so that should be enough. The young special Junin quickly nodded and ran off. Jiraiya asked in a calm voice, why the northern wall in particular? The Kyuubi's attack did the most damage to this side of the village, Naruto said. The guards have the hardest time fixing all the holes in our defenses there. If any other places need more people, we'll be in trouble. We're running low. He turned to Orochimaru, who had been watching the whole thing with interest. Can you tell me anything else about the people who are attacking? Orochimaru nodded. Of course. There was a destroyed Konoha outpost to the northwest of the village. It was very close to a personal research facility that I am building in the area. The enemy was very thorough in their attack, and by the time I came to check out the interruption, they had already left. Orochimaru licked the side of his lips, as if he was enjoying the scene he had found, but Naruto wasn't sure if he was just imagining it.
When I got there were only signs of fire jutsu use and nothing else. If I hadn't stumbled upon the empty grounds of the outpost I knew was there, it might have been a day before anyone knew the attack happened, since there were no planned changes of watch in that time. The attack itself must have come from underground, but it could have been made to look like that, since that is a common Iwa tactic.
Then how do we know it's them? Naruto looked at Jiraiya and asked. Unfortunately, Iwa isn't the only country we don't get along with well since the war. Jiraiya sighed. Yes, that's true, but Iwa is still our best bet, given our history together and their dislike of you in particular. If they leave no direct sign of their passage, no one will be able to blame them, but everyone will still think they were involved. If there are no witnesses, a treaty can't be broken, Orochimaru said. Many people would be better off if you died. In fact, because it took you so long to get better, many people think you are permanently disfigured or badly hurt, which is obviously an exaggeration. He nodded. Your attackers probably believe the rumors that you were weak and plan to take advantage of that.
Jiraiya said with a smile. Hey, they're going to be in for a surprise. Minato was able to seal the Kyuubi, and if you and I keep an eye on Konoha, we'll kill these Iwa nin like flies.
Orochimaru nodded, but he didn't really want to agree that Jiraiya was strong. He narrowed his eyes. They will either strike soon, while they still have a chance of being surprised, or give up before they even try when they see that their target is ready to fight. Are you in good shape to fight, Hokage-sama? Almost, Naruto gave a small wince. Not up to killing an army, suffice it to say, but I hope that won't be necessary. I assume the enemy is planning a sneak attack, a precision strike, not an open confrontation. Proper assassination attempts are never that obvious. Jiraiya said with a small smile, at least this gives me a reason to finally kick my student out of the hospital. He's been stuck in this room for too long, meditating all day. Now that he can move again, he should stretch his muscles a bit. Orochimaru's snake-like eyes got a little bit narrower. So, the rumors about your wounds weren't all lies. Were there any side effects from your fight with the Biju that would require you to stay for a long time? You seem pretty healthy. Demon chakra poured over me, Naruto said, moving his hand to one of the bandages on his face. He didn't want to draw attention to the pretty bad damage on his chest, which was mostly hidden by the bandage. You must know about the Gold and Silver Brothers, right? He asked, lifting one of the binds that covered his whiskers. Because of the Kyuubi's chakra's corrosive effects on my body, it took me a while to regain control of my own chakra. Other than that, nothing has happened that should affect my performance in the long run. Jiraiya slapped Naruto's shoulder and smiled thinly as he did so. Don't worry, Jiraiya said. I gave him all the tests I could think of, and he's in good shape. We can talk about it over a bowl of sake if you'd like. Orochimaru's mouth moved in a way that could have been a half smile, and he tilted his head. When everything is over, I might want to look into how this chakra works. Since this kind of thing doesn't happen very often, it seems like a good thing to study. Naruto took off the bandages again. They didn't fit as well as before and tickled his cheek, but he didn't care. The problem that was coming was much more important. From what he knew about Iwa, he knew that when they got involved, there was a high chance of other people getting hurt because they ripped up the ground and everything on it. A village that was already in bad shape couldn't afford this kind of damage. He would have to give them a clear target that was as far away from them as possible. He looked to his side and saw his father's cloak on the wall. It was a stark reminder of what he had just decided to do. He was pretty sure that Orochimaru hadn't even thought about the possibility that he was a fake. Even though he wasn't sure how he did it, putting the part of his father that stayed with him into his voice helped a lot. It was time to move on to the next step. There was no way to turn around. Might as well jump right in. Naruto took a quick step forward, feeling the limits of his half-healed body. Thankfully, it was much better than the day before. Sage mode had done wonders for his chakra levels, But he was still hurt, and he felt a little weak without the constant flow of natural energy to support his every step. Minato didn't know how to use senjutsu well, so he should have stayed away from it. At least until he could say that he had learned it as this new person.
This will just have to do. Naruto gave himself a happy smile as he put on the white cloak over his bandaged body. He spread it out and enjoyed the strange sense of familiarity that came with it, a sense of nostalgia even though that was impossible. It fit him perfectly, so he turned to the special kunai with 3 points on the wall. Then he remembered that it was in a trap.
He couldn't make a mistake, and asking Jiraiya about it would have shown that something was wrong, since there was no reason to keep a trapped kunai around a fallen Hokage. He was in a meditative trance when he felt the seal, and the chakra was clearly Jiraiya's. It was also very complicated. Still, he knew Jiraiya well enough to know that he just had to figure out which side to come at it from. Jiraiya saw that Naruto was in trouble and twitched his index finger. Naruto saw the movement in the kunai's blade reflection. It was the best hint Naruto could hope for, so he quickly grabbed the spiked kunai and pushed on the seal's chakra flow with his own pulse, hoping that he understood the hint correctly. The seal didn't move, but it made a quiet hissing sound. Naruto had to stop himself from sighing with relief, even though he wanted to.
As he turned to the two Sannin, he skillfully twisted the kunai between his fingers and slid it into a small hole in the cloak. Jiraiya and Orochimaru were both watching him move, and that small movement told them all kinds of things. Naruto asked in a friendly tone, "Shall we?" as he pulled the cloak tighter around himself to hide the full extent of his bandages. Everyone knew he was hurt, but it would be stupid to show how his stomach was bandaged, especially in front of Orochimaru. Jiraiya said, "Right behind you, Hokage-sama," and he gave a sneaky wink. Shimura Danzo muttered curses under his breath and looked annoyedly to his side. Between the Kyuubi attacking and destroying the village and the many threats from outside the village, his time was limited. But here he was, walking with Hiruzen, who didn't seem to want to move things along quickly and often left long silences. On top of that, the damned man was very sneaky, avoiding questions and talking in generalities about what was making him so quiet. Danzo knew that Hiruzen wanted to pay the Hokage a personal visit, which was worrying because the Hokage was still locked up in the hospital. Still, Danzo knew that Hiruzen could have easily returned to his seat, but he had missed his chance. There must have been more going on. After a long, tiring walk with his old teammate, he was finally able to relax when they finally started moving toward the Konoha hospital. Hiruzen looked pretty sad, but that was probably because they were still surrounded by destruction from the Kyuubi's attack, which would take weeks to clean up. Having a sick or dying Hokage on top of that would be a lot for him as well. As they walked up the long path to the hospital, there was a feeling of dread in the air, and several guards saw them coming, even though they knew who they were. 2 of them were actually members of Root, but neither had been called to active duty because Root was in just as much disarray as the village. Shiranui Genma, a member of the Hokage's guard platoon, stopped his shunshin right in front of him and Hiruzen. He gave a quick salute and then stopped. "Sandame-sama, Danzo-san." He nodded in recognition. "I was sent to find you because Hokage-sama heard that an Iwa was going to attack him soon." Danzo was interested by Sarutobi's frown. "Sarutobi asked you directly, why did you leave your post? The Hokage is not good enough to." Genma said in a calm voice, "Direct orders from the Hokage, sir. Until he gives up the job, I'm supposed to follow his orders before anyone else's, but I've been told to follow your orders for my next tasks." In the third's eyes, there was a deep shadow. And who is protecting Minato right now? The way he said that name was strange, almost like he was mad at the man. Danzo narrowed his eyes as he thought about what his old teammate was thinking. Jiraiya-sama and Orochimaru-sama just came into the hospital room, and Orochimaru-sama told Hokage-sama about this information, Genma said quickly. "As soon as he found out about the danger, he sent me to get you." Hiruzen said a silent curse, and only the movement of his lips showed how angry he was. Danzo thought about what Genma had said. He hadn't heard yet that an attack was coming, but his forces outside the walls were scattered because of the Kyuubi's attack, so that wasn't a big surprise. Still, it couldn't be a real army of any size, or the sensor ninjas would have picked up on it a long time ago. Then, a small task force. A moment of weakness was used to try to kill the Hokage. He began to think about the other half of the message and what it meant.
Even though Orochimaru had responded to him a long time ago, he went straight to the Hokage with this information. Either the danger was so close that the man couldn't waste any time, or, as was often the case with Orochimaru, there was something else going on under the surface. From the outside, Danzo looked completely uninterested. The Northern Watch will need to be enforced if Iwa sends a force our way, Sarutobi said quickly. It's the weakest part of our defenses right now. Genma said. An Anbu team is already there on the orders of the Hokage. Danzo smiled just a little. Minato was always quick on the draw, and it looks like he has this situation under control. We should join him at the hospital. If his condition allows it, I'd suggest moving him out of there just in case. Your turn, Hiruzen. I don't think he'll want us to get in the way, but we might want to hurry to him, Sarutobi said, pointing to an Anbu waiting on a nearby rooftop. Within seconds, the man in the mask was by his side. Tell the Anbu forces to be ready for an attack, and keep a close eye on the ground because we might also be dealing with people who use earth techniques. The Anbu agent bowed and briefly looked at Danzo before flashing away again. One of yours, huh? If your successor is awake enough to give orders, I'm guessing he's getting better, right? Danzo asked as he walked faster toward the hospital. He was quickly surrounded by Genma and the third. I thought he was in a lot worse shape than I thought, and I'm glad to see I was wrong. As expected, he is getting better, Sarutobi said, before turning to Genma. Do I remember right that Raida was sent to you? Genma nodded. When Jiraiya put us in the hospital to get rid of the Anbu guards, Raida-san and Magpie were sent to watch over the children, he said. As far as I know, nothing has changed, she said. Danzo frowned as Sarutobi murmured, of course, the children. Who are the kids? Why should they matter? He didn't have much time to figure out what was going on because they were moving quickly toward the hospital. Even though there was a small chance that intruders were already in the village, it wouldn't be smart to warn them too soon, so they kept their pace slow. The Anbu on the roof seemed to be keeping an eye on things, but everything seemed to be fine. At that moment, the main door to the hospital opened, and 3 people walked out into the moonlit night as if this happened every night. Jiraiya was the first person to leave the building. His white hair was ruffled by the light wind as he looked back at the people behind him. He was laughing at a joke that neither of his friends seemed to find very funny, even though they were both giving him small, polite smiles. Orochimaru stood next to him on his left. He was thin, and his clothes were tied together with a thick rope. His long black hair stood out against his pale skin. Orochimaru looked the most bored and even annoyed out of the 3. On Jiraiya's right, Minato stood out with his billowing cloak and messy mop of blonde hair. He looked very sick, though, with pale skin that was mostly bandaged up. He walked without making it clear that he was in a lot of pain, even though he seemed to favor his right side and kept moving one hand to his stomach. But he didn't look like he was in pain, so it couldn't be crippling. The 4th Hokage answered a question Jiraiya must have just asked him by saying, I want you to be seen. The enemy should know you're there, unless they were really bad at planning. Even if they were, they should have at least thought it was possible. Orochimaru asked, so you want to get the enemy to come out? Minato shook his head and sighed softly. No, that would just cause trouble in the village as it is. Getting into a fight with Iwa would be fine at some point, but right now I want them to back off and go home. If that's not possible, I want them to make a mistake and then back off. Telling Iwa off for trying to kill me would be a lot easier if I didn't have to leave a bunch of dead bodies in my wake again. I would think that a dead assassin would be a clear sign, Sarutobi said without a full greeting, just a short tilt of his head. Wouldn't it be better to fight these enemy shinobi when they try to get close to you and show Iwa that Konoha is still strong? Minato said, I can do that without too much bloodshed. From what Orochimaru said about what happened to one of our outposts, it would be hard to minimize damage to Konoha, even if these enemies were easy to beat. They would definitely be a threat to civilians and our infrastructure. I'd rather a fight happen outside the city walls and as far away from the hospital as we can get, or not at all if we can help it. Minato's explanation didn't surprise Danzo because he had already thought along the same lines. Because his root forces were so spread out, it was best to avoid a direct confrontation. Even more so if such a destructive meeting took place in the village itself, which had already been destroyed enough. Hokage-sama, Danzo said politely, drawing Minato's attention to him. The man seemed uncertain for a moment, but then his eyes got hard and suspicious, just like they had every time they had met before. It looks like people have been talking too much about your injuries, which is good, he said. Minato gave a small smile. Just a little, he whispered in a sneaky way, and then, looking at Jiraiya, he was back to business. Sensei, you should be doing something. I told you. I'm moving, the Toad Sage said in annoyance, and he winked at Sarutobi in passing. Don't stress yourself too much, were his last words before he used the Shunshin no Jutsu to dash away. He will patrol the walls, Minato said in explanation. I trust that he is capable of holding off the enemy, if necessary. He nodded to himself. Shimura-san, Minato said, looking directly at Danzo. I am sorry that our meeting is getting delayed, but I'm sure we can put it off without any bad thoughts. I was looking forward to it, after a fashion. It is not a problem, Danzo hurried to assure, wondering why Minato had chosen to call it a meeting. Might have all the elusiveness have been on Minato's orders. Had he been awake for that long, then. I'm sure this crisis will solve itself quite soon, he added carefully. From up close, Danzo noticed, there was a something different about Minato. Not anything significant that would have raised suspicion, but a subtle something that did not quite fit. When a light from a nearby lantern touched the half-bandaged cheek of the Hokage, he realized what it was. A small marking there, similar to a scar, all too reminiscent of stories he had read about contact with the Kyuubi's chakra. That's what the different feeling had to be, Danzo realized. Up close, it was as if the man before him had been submerged and dragged out of demonic energy repeatedly, likely that was what had actually happened in their fight. It was a wonder that the Hokage was even standing. Was this why Minato was reluctant to let anyone in contact with him? Was the creature's chakra as corrosive now as it was when it attacked? There is another thing. I may have a need for your expertise, Minato said shortly, which shook Danzo out of his thoughts. These Iwa Nin might try to sneak in underground, and I'd like you to help with organizing the effort to kick them out into the open, so they can be drawn away from the village itself. If Danzo had been anyone else, such a proposition from the Hokage would have been somewhat unusual, but he knew that Minato at least had an inkling as to what secrets were buried underneath the ground level of Konoha. Unlike Hiruzen, who seemed to prefer keeping a blind eye to those dealings, Minato was well aware, and mostly tolerated those matters as a necessity. The offer might have been a reminder, or a gesture of faith, but it should have been obvious to both parties that Root would never allow any intruder onto their training grounds. By offering at least a partial control over the teams that would be sent to those places, Minato was purposefully giving him room for maneuvering, perhaps even permission to command those secret forces. Danzo could hardly say no to such an offer, and the Hokage had to have known that. Honestly, he liked that, preferring it to Hiruzen's complete denial of the shadows beneath the village. I'll see to it, he answered simply. Thank you. Minato turned back to Orochimaru, who had remained conspicuously silent during the entire conversation. I would like it if you checked up on the approaches to the hospital. I'm sure that you could think of a dozen ways Iwa could use for such a purpose, and snake summons can feel the vibrations in the ground, if it comes to that. Orochimaru nodded swiftly, then paused. If I might ask, Hokage-sama, where will you go, knowing that you are their target? It would be unwise to leave you nearly unprotected while you are injured. Oh, don't worry, I can take a few Iwa Nin, Minato said with a self-assurance that didn't leave much in the way of doubt. For now, I need to talk over a few things with Sarutobi-sama, and I don't plan on seeking these assassins out without a proper contingent of bodyguards in any case. He inclined his head towards Genma, and smiled. I understand, Orochimaru said, though he did not seem convinced. I will return when my inspection is complete. The group dispersed, each with their own destination, leaving both the former and the current Hokage for their private council. Naruto remained calmly at the third side, as they followed along an empty street towards the northern side of the village, shadowed at some distance by several bodyguards. Included was Genma, who had been one of his father's most trusted protectors. He knew that, vaguely, since Tsunade had told him at some point, and they had even met in the future. He also knew it more immediately, by the feeling he got when standing near to him. A certain air of recognition, of implicit trust. He had no doubt that it was his father's feeling that was transferred to him. Unlike Naruto,
who was positively relaxed now that he had hoodwinked both Orochimaru and Danzo in the span of half an hour. Hiruzen Sarutobi was less than enthused. What are you thinking? Wearing that cloak, and that face? He hissed just as Naruto smiled. Well, blame Jiraiya, Naruto pointed out dryly. I'm of a similar mind as you, I think. Still, Orochimaru's arrival put me on the spot, and with all the prodding and pestering, I just went for it. My dad wouldn't mind, anyway. Jiraiya's idea, Sarutobi said, sighing. I should have expected. He always has these brilliantly stupid plans. What is he playing at this time? He shook his head, frowning. You are aware that this isn't something you can just go back on, correct? You opened a box that can't be closed. It won't end well for you. Naruto gave a shrug. I know. Still, if you want to call me an intruder in front of the people around here, good luck to you. I'm pretty sure my henge is as solid as they come, and I've got his chakra in my system. Two of the Sannin accepted my authority minutes before, too. He smiled at the third's frown. You'll have to deal with my presence like this, at least until Jiraiya comes around and presents a perfectly reasoned argument that will convince you. Myself. I got nothing. I know I'm a fraud. Sarutobi glared. A fake Hokage, what has Konoha come to? Hey, I was gonna be a real one in a few weeks, Naruto objected, but he gulped at the third's expression. With his chakra back under his control, he was reasonably sure that he could handle a handful of Iwa Nin, but he had no chance in hell at escaping a younger third, the god of shinobi. For what it's worth, I'm sorry it turned out this way, Naruto offered. This man was not a grandfather he had spent his childhood with, and he was forgetting just what he could and couldn't joke about. I figured that for this situation, painting a target on my head is ideal. If I fail, Iwa gets me, and you're back to the square one, able to take the place you already let slip by, and things'll probably be okay. If I succeed, well, we still can return to the way things were, I guess. Sarutobi did not look convinced in the slightest. The only ones that have seen me outside, besides the obvious people, are just some Anbu that can keep quiet on orders, Naruto said. Until the morning comes, at least, the fourth being active again will just be another rumor among the other outrageous ones. Do you think I picked this road for the fun of it? It's abandoned. Until tomorrow. This'll be a story just like, the Hokage beat the Kyuubi in a straight fight. Or, the Hokage's totally skinless now. I mean, do you honestly believe that anyone would buy that two Hokages went out for a stroll in the moonlight? The third continued to glare, even if Naruto could see a fight being fought against the twitch of his lips. Then again, people could smile and still be furious inside. Sakura came to mind immediately, and he shuddered. You are looking at this rather narrowly, the third said. There is more at stake than rumors. Anyone who sees you today will conclude that Minato is going to return to his post of Hokage. He paused. I must ask, why did you send everyone else away? If it is solely to taunt me, I think you'll find yourself disappointed. Nah, I didn't want to do that, Naruto protested. Look, OG. He bit his lip, reminding himself that this version of the third was not the old man he grew up with. Sarutobi-sama, he began anew. I have told you this before, obviously, but I am Naruto from the future, and you are the closest thing to a grandfather I have ever had. I don't want to antagonize you with this whole playing my dad thing. I wouldn't have considered this approach if I wasn't convinced that I can fix a few of the things I mucked up with my arrival. Sarutobi gave him a look. It might have meant, explain or, shut up, but Naruto gambled on the former. You and I both know that the rumors have grown too much, and not just within Konoha. There's movement under all this, and I was sending assassins might be just the beginning. I didn't have much proof before, because there is not much that you could verify, but I promise that I do know the future of Konoha. Naruto paused. Old man, there are hard times ahead. Not this year, and not even very soon, but things are happening that will lead to the Fourth Shinobi World War and other disasters. My arrival alone has already changed some things, and not necessarily for the better. Just know that the Kyuubi's attack wasn't an accident, but a move in a game that is way above our heads. Sarutobi sniffed. Boy, being a Hokage is more than just wearing a hat. Yeah, I know that, Naruto said carefully. I was supposed to be the sixth Hokage when I left my own time, so I've known for a long time. I care about few things in my life because I didn't grow up with many friends or loyalty to anything. But Konoha is one of the things I love because it's the village where I grew up and the people here are the ones I grew to like. He paused and looked up. My friends may not be much older than babies right now, but that doesn't mean I can't fight for them the way they would fight for me, and the way they will fight for me if I can help it. Sarutobi gave a very short and tiny smile. Naruto gave the old man a warm smile and said, "You know, I think I have the proof you wanted to hear." Sarutobi blinked. "You do?" "Sure." Naruto said. "It's about the first time you met my father." The man's eyes got bigger. "You probably didn't tell anyone, and he probably wouldn't tell anyone outside of his family. You said he was crazy. Crazy enough to give up his life first and then think about what he had done." Sarutobi took a slow breath. "What made you find out about that?" He scratched the back of his head nervously and said, "It's complicated. Let's leave it at that." The third closed his eyes and thought for a moment. "Yes, I remember the first time we met. Minato was a young, foolish boy back then." Naruto said, "When I was young, I was also a fool, and some might say I still am. Still, you were my first teacher, even if it wasn't official, and you never taught me anything wrong. Like my father before me, I'm willing to risk everything to keep the will of fire going, so you must have done something right. Maybe you gave us something to learn from, someone to look up to, and a reason to always try to become Hokage." "That's good to hear," Sarutobi said after a longer pause, "but this one was definitely more comfortable than all the others. By the way, you know that if all of this is a plan on your part, I'll kill you myself, and it won't be quick." The words were as cool as the night air, but Naruto didn't think they were as scary as they could have been. "If I ever hurt Konoha on purpose, I'll let you do it," Naruto said in a dry tone. "Speaking of Konoha," he said, but his tone was less serious and his mind was wandering. "I keep getting interrupted today. Jiraiya just found someone sneaking in from the northeast. He was using the kunai my clone stole from the Hokage residence. I had almost forgotten about that one." He frowned. "The enemy is closer than I would have liked. Looks like I have work to do." Sarutobi grimaced and managed to turn only halfway toward where he thought Jiraiya should be. A few things happened that made it hard for him to come up with the right answer. First, there was a bright flash coming from the direction Naruto had mentioned. Then, there was a loud explosion, and the injured nin just vanished from where he was standing. This time, Naruto's quick use of Hiraishin was almost automatic as he threw himself across the gap between places. He didn't use chakra to overpower the jutsu, which was a smart move. In an instant, he was next to Jiraiya with a three-pronged kunai in his hand. The enemy must have deflected it or thrown it just recently, because both he and the kunai were still in the air. In the split second before he landed, Naruto took a quick look around to see what was going on. Jiraiya was facing two enemy ninja and looked a little burned from the explosion that had happened just before. Both of them jumped back when he suddenly appeared, and as he landed with both his and Jiraiya's kunai in his hands, he looked at each of them in turn. One of them was a young kunoichi who reminded him a lot of Kuretsuchi, but it couldn't have been her so many years ago. Then, maybe her mother. He didn't know the other shinobi, who was a big man, but his head guard, which was wrapped around the upper part of his arm, told him enough. Iwa. There could be more around, but they might be hidden. The former Jinchuriki grinned meanly and saw that the Kuretsuchi lookalike had the same look on his face. With all the bandages on the bottom half of his face, he had to look even scarier than usual when he went into battle, but he had to give Zabuza credit for the idea. "The yellow flash," she said slowly as she took out a sleek sword. "You seem sick, but it doesn't matter. I'll have fun cutting you open. Try it," Naruto said in a whisper. Jiraiya looked at him with worry, but he just gave her a big smile and started spinning the three-pronged kunai in his hands. "You always get in trouble, sensei. What would you do without me?"
I will continue the story in next part. Till then, we weeb offline.